our Board of Education pre-work session. The board chair, James Herndon, cannot be present today, so as the vice chair, I will be presiding. Dr. Whitaker, please introduce the first presentation. Our board meeting cadence allows board members to prepare for upcoming regular meetings through pre-work sessions. The sessions are typically more casual and primarily for information gathering. No formal votes will be taken. We will begin our pre-work session with our book study for the year, The Governance Core. Sophie DeLena will facilitate Chapter 4, Onboarding and Welcoming New Trustees. Thank you, Sophie, for,
So Chapter 4 is onboarding, welcoming new trustees. I am a new trustee as the board representative, so I felt like this was a good chapter for me. But on the first page, there is a claim made that one new trustee creates a new board. And I guess my first question is, do you guys agree with this? And if so, why do you guys agree with it?
I mean, you make it so difficult for us to operate under our normal procedures that, yes, we've had to make huge adjustments to have you on this board. No. The point that's made is, yes, we have to accommodate new people that are on the board. I think that every new perspective means that you think about things in a different way. And actually, to be totally honest, having a student representative on the board has actually forced us to consider things in ways that we maybe haven't thought of before, but that's, I think, a very positive aspect of that change.
Yeah. I think I agree with the statement in the book. I think a new trustee does create a new board. You bring new perspectives, new energy, and we have two new trustees, and so, you know, it's a new administration, and I think these have been, our new trustees have been great additions with the perspectives and the questions that you bring, the learning opportunities.
Well, I'm the new one. I love asking questions. I love learning from people, and I think it's just great because when you do share things, I think it helps contextualize or add something. So thank you.
Somewhere in the book it talks about how sometimes new board members have, you know, preconceived ideas about what a board is or how a board functions, but then when, you know, they've been elected and they're on the board, it's surprising or it's something that's unexpected. So I guess my second question is, when you were elected, is there anything that was surprising about being on a board that you just didn't know before?
Yes. I mean, the answer to that is a profound yes. My primary experience prior to being on a school board with elected bodies were city commissions, council members, for example. And those are legislators that are elected by a specific constituency and that they are responsible to the interests of that specific constituency, very often defined by what they ran on. And it was jarring to join a school board and find out that actually I don't represent any adults in this district and I don't have an adult constituency, but that actually the students of the district are my constituents. And in fact, all of the students, not just the students that are in my particular district. And so that mental shift where oh wait, this is a different job. This isn't a group of 5 individuals representing different constituencies. This is, or 6 now, actually. This is a body of 1 acting in concert to the benefit of the students of the district. That's actually I'm not sure I'm still there yet. It's the constant learning process.
So coming from the classroom, it was a huge learning process for me. There was so much about the business side of the school system that I just really didn't know a lot about. And I was elected in November 2019, and I started right away because we had a school board member who had stepped down. and then the pandemic hit a few months later, and so I learned a lot really quickly as things were happening with nutrition, and we were, less students weren't in the building, so they weren't getting lunches, and I just learned so much, really quickly, and it was quite a learning experience during the pandemic. So yeah, there was a lot that I had to learn.
I think I think two things. The first thing is how quickly you have to learn a lot of information. There's, multiple areas that make a school board function. Some of it is the team dynamic, some of it is the operations dynamic, even simple things or that you, I think, take for granted, like how seamlessly the buses run, or that the lunch lines function seamlessly. We take those things for granted, but now we have insight into how those things run as school board members. But I think in the first year or so, and Tasha White told me this, the first year or so you spend understanding how the school board functions and how the school system functions, but a year actually is a pretty rapid pace, I think. And I think the other thing is that although we all have individual opinions, thoughts, strengths, weaknesses, we're a voice in a governing body of one. I think if you've been in other leadership positions, or if you serve in other boards or in other governing capacities, that can feel a little different. But when you are in this capacity, you have to be one unifying voice, which I think is a different type of leadership skill that you have to learn, or at least I did.
I think, like Dr. Johnson, the classroom experience, and I think being a teacher really has helped understand that I'm working for students, so that's not an issue. And I feel like I paid a lot of attention to school district things before, but definitely making decisions and looking at things from a kind of long-range system-wide is definitely different from even planning the school year and looking what are the outcomes at the end. So I think paying attention to that and reprogramming some of that while still paying attention in the classroom was probably the biggest learning shift for me.
And then the chapter also speaks about governance culture. So my last question is, with the addition of a Board of Education student representative, do you guys think that governance culture has changed at all?
I think that's a really good question, actually, so I'm going to be brainstorming it as I speak out loud, so bear with me. But I think that the biggest shift from my perspective culturally is that while we are, in theory, always focused on, and our role is really focused on serving the students, it can be extremely easy to get distracted by, the latest nutrition report or the, bus schedule from transportation or, some of the operational details that get presented to us, and not necessarily be thinking absolutely at the student level. And I think having you on this board, constantly reinforces, how does this impact the student? How would I think about this to best impact the student? And how is, whatever the information being presented, how does this ultimately drive successful outcomes for students? It is very, in a way, focusing. And so I think that's, in my mind, probably one of the biggest benefits of having you.
I think essentially the governance does not change, but having your perspective on the board just increases our efficacy. But I think, we have, policies that we, agree on. We have these board norms that we agree on, those things that, are our guardrails, and those things ultimately stay the same. But I think your, the perspectives of a student representative and a new board member, just increases, the opportunities to be even better.
I agree with that. I think it's perspective. I am an inquirer by nature. I like to ask questions. I like to hear stories. I think that sometimes bothers people, namely Hans, because he questions. But also, I have 4 kids, and having kids in the school system where, when I feel like I've made a decision and I don't really quite understand how that decision has landed, or how it's gonna be implemented, or how it hit, I would go back and I ask them, well, what happened with the school lunch policy, or are people talking about this, and I think having somebody that's not my own advisory council, my own children, I think is also helpful for perspective. I think it's been a couple of times that I've met with Dr. Whitaker and we've made a decision. I'm like, did somebody ask Sophie what she knows? Or did somebody ask Sophie what she thinks? And I think not always looking through something or our decision-making through an adult lens, because that's all we know at this point. We only know what we see or feel or through our own perspective, but having that alternative perspective about how the decisions we make actually directly impact our constituents, which is our children, I think is helpful, and then having somebody who can give us direct candid feedback.
I think when you asked about change, I didn't really see it, but I think the discussion, one of the first discussions we had about how, for our norms for you, right, and what was acceptable in terms of asking you a question and speak, I hope exemplifies how we work as a board, so that, this person asks a question, this person provides this context, someone else asks a question, and so I think just through that, there are natural changes that take place. So,
Does anyone else have any about the chapter in this book?
Could I ask the 2 new board members a question?
sure.
And actually, Board Member Anderson, I'm gonna ask you to answer first so that we give Board Member Delana a moment to think about it.
Yeah.
How could we do better onboarding y'all next time, if there were to be one?
I've been thinking about that. I know. But, it's the nature of me as a teacher. I'm always like, what could I have done differently and better? Not that it's bad, just what could be improved on. And I don't know how to answer it directly yet, because I've been thinking about it a lot. I think the orientation that I had was phenomenal, right? I really appreciated, and I know y'all were so patient because I asked questions probably of each of you, because I like to think I know what I'm doing, even if I'm still learning as I'm doing it. But I have to get back to you with the other stuff, because I think it is something we should talk about.
Sure.
I would say probably familiarizing myself with the strategic plan, because I know on the slideshow, when it goes on, everything is driven with the strategic plan. And so if I knew a little bit more about, the end goal, or, the different areas of the strategic plan and how everything fits under it, I think that would make understanding for the board decisions a little bit easier.
Thank you.
Oh, quiz. Anyway,
I had a question. This was on, starts on page 83, then page 84, about having a full discussion with the board and going through the governance handbook. And so I was like, did we do that? I know that we had, and so then I got confused on time. I know we had GSBA training at the beginning of the year, but then I don't think you were here yet. And
So I don't know, and I read that as well, when it talks about the governance handbook. I said, I think we can say, yes, we have norms, but that there is a governance handbook discussed in chapter 8. So what that meant for me at the top of 84, I said, oh, well, I guess when we get to chapter 8, maybe that will be some of the things that we can do to work to improve the board. Maybe it is to create their handbook. I know at the retreat last week, or not last week, a couple weeks ago, what was also stated that we should have maybe job descriptions for chair and vice chair. So that could be like the first step. And then we can really codify all of it into a handbook. So I thought about that. And it gives us some samples in chapter 8. I didn't go read ahead, but I was curious about it, definitely.
Not that I'm gonna suggest we add meetings to our December schedule, so I'll just be very clear, the board member Anderson breathing a sigh of relief there. But I think in having a conversation as a board about the strategic plan, where it came from, what our perspectives on each of the initiatives are, that, killing two birds with one stone, really, basically what board member Delana just suggested, and as a part of the onboarding process, just really kind of touching base with the moral imperative and our core purpose over the next number of years. I think that would be a beneficial conversation.
Yeah, because I think I didn't share, some of you were so helpful in prepping me, individually. And then I think what I remember is in January, we had a discussion of our norms, right? And so what I was thinking is maybe there is another meeting, but no, wait, do we want a meeting? But there were lots of things that worked really well.
So, not to take away from what Dr. Sultan was about to say, but next month, we will start out with the self-assessment again in January, because it'll be a year since we've taken the self-assessment. And then also in February, at the February board retreat, it is taking a look at our KPIs, and also the KPIs come from the strategic plan, because there is to be a quarterly discussion on it. So I know that is on the February agenda for our retreat.
To the extent that any of that is executive session, I would request of the board that we waive the requirement that we permit board member Delana to attend those portions of the exec session.
Yeah.
If it, I don't know if it is, but.
Yeah, the strategic plan is not an executive session item.
The board, our evaluation of ourselves.
Right here.
Okay, fantastic. Good. Okay.
That is all for this session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie, for facilitating today. Next month, as we mentioned, we will not engage in a chapter of the governance core. Instead, we will complete a GSBA board self-assessment. Board members, please complete the board self-assessment in assembly prior to the meeting, and we will discuss it in January. Dr. Whitaker, please introduce the next item.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sultan. I would like to call on Mrs. Amanda Lynch, Chief of Staff, to seek your feedback on 3 personnel policy drafts.
Good afternoon, Acting Chair Sultan, esteemed members of the board, Student Representative Delana, and Superintendent Dr. Jima Whitaker. In accordance with the 2024-2025 policy calendar, personnel is scheduled for pre-work in the month of December. Today we have 3 policies on this pre-work agenda from these areas. GAMA, Drug-Free Workplace, which is a revision to an existing policy. GAHB, Staff Political Activities. And GAMC, responsibility to report criminal charges to employer. As a reminder to the public, policies that are presented during pre-work are new business on which we are seeking board input. These policies are being presented as initial drafts. They are being shared to gather board input and feedback that can be reflected in drafting or revising future versions. I will also invite Adina Walker, Chief of Human Resources, to join me up front so that she can be available to help answer any questions on these personnel policies that may come up during discussion. First, policy GAMA is an existing policy. It was already in place and was adopted by the Board of Education in November of 2022. A need to add additional language around reasonable suspicion was identified, which is what is being presented for feedback tonight. As an existing policy, an environmental scan of other district policies was not provided to the board. Rather, the proposed additional language was shared. We have provided the GAMA policies for DeKalb County and Clayton County for board members at their seats tonight as other district samples, however. For our revised draft, the added language defines reasonable suspicion and allows for drug and/or alcohol testing when reasonable suspicion exists that an employee is under the influence of a controlled substance or alcohol while performing their duties on behalf of the district. The new language indicates the superintendent shall develop procedures for conducting reasonable suspicion drug and alcohol testing, and states that refusal to participate in reasonable suspicion testing will result in termination. At this time, I welcome any board input or feedback for policy GAMA, drug-free workplace.
If someone has a legal prescription for medical marijuana, how do we know, and how are we able to? Right, so I understand they cannot use it while in the workplace, but if they test for it and they haven't used it, over a period of time, it's still gonna show up positive. Like, how do we manage that difference?
Well, depending on what their actions are and if we were observing them in the workplace, then that would be something that they would disclose to us, and then we would take that into consideration of why we are testing them. If they are inebriated or anything like that in the workplace, then that's when we would have to work through it. But if they have their prescription, then that's something that we need to be aware of, and then we will make a problem.
So is that's something that's managed in regulations, or it's not obviously a policy, but it's the next tier down, is that what I'm hearing?
That would be explained in the presentation.
Procedures, okay.
And is reasonable suspicion based on the discretion of the principal, or do they have to have some kind of second check by an administrator, or how does that?
Exactly. Normally, if something comes to our attention, it may be a coworker that's reporting it, but of course, as a supervisor, they would have to be the one to observe, observe their actions within the workplace. Is it in altering their ability to do their job? And then they would just contact us to see through the point.
Us, meaning HR?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
This is just kind of piggybacking on Hans's question. So I understand, we're governors and we approve the policy, but the policy is allowing process. And so I think to Hans's question, I'm still unclear in the event that someone is behaving suspiciously and they don't want to take that, like, what is there a particular metric? Like, I know for alcohol, there's like a blood alcohol level. I should know nothing about what the testing would reveal. So I guess I'm still asking your question.
Well, the development of the procedure, because this is changing the policy. So very similar to how when we approve the policy on demonstration and stripes, first you approve the policy, and then we write the regulation that goes to the policy.
And
And go on.
then we would lend to our legal department to see exactly what the legal amounts are, and then we will.
So as proposed, it's adding that reasonable suspicion piece to it that allows for testing when reasonable suspicion finds it, and allows for the testing.
And board, I want you to know that we have dealt with this on more than one occasion in my tenure, which is why that is being suggested as a change to the policy.
I have a question. Does the teacher get to, if there's reasonable suspicion, does the teacher get removed, like, up until the test? I don't know, I guess, like, when is the teacher staying and then being, like, leaving, or when can they come back?
So if there's reasonable suspicion, and feel free to jump in, I'm gonna do my best here, but you guys can see why I brought, Ms. Walker up here. But of course, if there's suspicion, the teacher would be removed from the students because of a safety perspective. This allows the testing to take place. Usually the testing takes place pretty immediately, and this does allow that if the teacher refused testing, it could result in disciplinary action up to and including termination. All right. Three more. Next up is policy GAHB, staff political activities. This is a new policy for consideration. When the policy audit was conducted last year, 3 of our 5 benchmark districts had this policy in place. We also recognize that our community values civic engagement, and having a policy for staff political activity will provide important guidance for CSD employees. Board members were provided with sample policies from other districts as part of the environmental scan that was conducted in drafting this initial policy. As drafted, this policy states the Board of Education recognizes employees have the same civic privileges as other citizens, including campaigning, holding office, and supporting candidates and causes in the political arena. However, it also states that the BOE recognizes that employees must uphold public trust and their political involvement must not interfere or conflict with job duties and responsibilities. The policy provides key definitions that are addressed in the policy, including employees, district facilities, and equipment or resources. Detailed guidance is provided for employee participation in political activities. The guidance prohibits the use of district facilities or resources and employee work time to promote political candidates. It states that employees shall not display political pictures, signs, posters, which includes attire, during normal business hours or while performing job duties. The policy does state employees may express opinions privately and publicly on political subjects, issues, and candidates, but should do so as individuals outside of their capacity as a district employee. When doing so, employees engaging in political activity shall make it clear that they are speaking and acting as an individual and that they do not represent the city schools of Decatur. The policy also allows for employees to be candidates for the Board of Education, but indicates that they must not continue employment of the same district while serving as a DOE member. This policy allows for disciplinary action for employees in violation of the policy. Finally, exceptions are also included. Among these are allowing political activities within the instructional program, such as mock elections, and explicitly stating that employees may place political advertising on their personal vehicles. At this time, I welcome any board input for policy GAHB, staff political activities.
I wanted to get clarification on the term political. Are we talking about just in terms of folks running for offices? Are we talking about issues that can be deemed political? How are we defining political?
Yeah, so that's not one of the definitions that we currently have in there. We do talk about a political candidate specifically, so that is something that would be covered. There are places in here where, I want to get the words right, but I think it says political issues.
Yeah, issues was
campaigning.
when I saw issues, I was like, oh, this is more than just a person.
Let me ask an explicit question on this point. Would someone advocating for Israel or Palestine fall under a political issue in this?
Or, gay pride.
Yep.
Or
Abortion rights.
abortion.
All of these are things that this board would need to determine.
I suspect that this policy is gonna have to be in a work session for a while. There's a lot for us to figure out here.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
You go ahead.
One of the points says that employees shall not display any political pictures, signs, posters, badges, buttons. Like, what about, there's a flag in the room.
Right. I underlined that. That was
Yeah.
one of the things I was, yeah.
So it's like, where is the line drawn with that kind of thing?
I was thinking of a few things. So if I read this correctly, an employee, for example, has their car. They can have whatever they want on the car, right? they may be a CSD employee, but, you know, within reasonable kind of behavior. So it sounds like then what we're doing is looking more specifically at, in your capacity as a teacher, in your work capacity as an administrator, do we want, and how do we want to define what constitutes a political activity, and therefore allowable to be displayed in a classroom, what is allowable to be worn, what is allowable. I mean, that's really what we're gonna have to decide, right?
Correct, exactly.
Which, I mean, if it matters, I think we are, I like that CSD already respects employees, because I know some school districts don't give employees as much, I don't know what noun to use. But I appreciate that we might need to clarify a little of this.
Not to oversimplify the matter, but I kind of read this, looking at that first bullet point, as kind of civic duty. So running for office, advocating for a candidate in office, less so into the arena of, political issues or, kind of that sort of, or really kind of getting into the arena of your free speech. So that, I read this, when I was reading this over, really read this as if you were running for office as a private citizen, or if you wanted to put your political beliefs or who you were voting for on display, like what the rules were for, you can't use the company copier to copy your political flyers. That was kind of what I was reading into that, not to oversimplify the issue, but that was how I was reading it.
This is in front of us for a reason, right? And so what is the objective that we are trying to resolve with this in front of us now?
I think it's to clarify where the board stands on staff political activities, so that we can use it to inform revision, so that we can work it through the process if it's the desire of the board to so adopt.
My second question is in the fourth bullet, where it says, the second phrase, the use of district facilities or resources and employee work time to promote political candidates is restricted. Is there a reason why we're limiting it to candidates and not just generalized political activity?
So that's a great point that could be clarified.
I mean, we do have, I think, elections next fall, and so I can see why we do want to have, some policies governing how we're doing things.
So that as well. So, that was something that did come up. I know, Ms. Anderson, when you were, running for the board, there was questions around some things that needed to be clarified, not necessarily in G, but in just, it lives in G because it has to deal with politics.
Right. So is it safe to say that we probably need a focused work session on this particular thing, similar to as we did with, nutrition, student lunch? Yeah.
Perfect.
I would say, I think we probably need to have a much larger conversation about this.
Great, well, I challenge you in the meantime to marinate on your thoughts, and I will bring together a structured protocol for us to work through, where we stand. All right, we're not done yet, though. We still have one more. Our third and final policy for pre-work today is policy GAMC, responsibility to report criminal charges to employer. This is a new policy. This policy requires employees to report events related to criminal charges and report them to the superintendent and the chief of human resources, reported within 5 days of its occurrence. Note that 5 is a change from the previous draft that you saw that said 3 to allow, because it's calendar days, so to allow for weekends and things like that. 5 is one adjustment that has been made to the language. The policy exempts minor traffic violations, such as speeding or parking tickets, from reporting. A failure to report any of the listed circumstances or events may result in disciplinary action. The policy as drafted also includes a section on sexually inappropriate conduct, explicitly stating that violations of the policy in the Georgia Code of a staff member toward a student would be grounds for disciplinary action, including discharge. At this time, I welcome any board feedback for policy GAMC, responsibility to report criminal charges to employer.
I forget what the term is, but like, we're informed about something that happens to a student where
Mandated
Or
reporter.
mandated
Yes.
reporter, does this create a mandated reporter?
We're already under that law anyway, we've already got mandated reporter. This is, for employees self-reporting any kind of criminal charges or things like that, specifically.
So if I am a teacher and one of my coworkers takes me into confidence about a, sexual harassment or something that is egregious, they've taken me into their confidence, am I now mandated to report that to you?
Only if that act is toward a student.
Okay, so this then, if I find out about something criminal, but it didn't happen to me, I don't have to report it to you.
That was like, under this interaction between.
That's not what this looks like. This looks like it's saying that if I find out about something criminal, I do have to report it to you.
This is self-report.
No, self-reporting.
Self-reporting.
Say, for instance, if you're this weekend, you're arrested for something, then you would have to let us know that has happened.
That first bullet is worded where it says employees to report. It's really any employee in the way that's written in the draft, that is down, so on and so forth, for a crime, shall report each and all of these events. So it's really the self-reporting aspect.
Now, here's the question. Okay, so one, I think this is kind of the guardrails we have because, we're certified or employees, so therefore PSC already knows for a new employee who's applying. But once someone is certified before they're renewed, so there's a 5-year window, okay, that makes perfect sense.
Yes.
But now Hans has introduced a question that maybe it's a PSC question more than a CSD question, because if we are now told of a, not necessarily alleged, okay, but, and I think I don't know, maybe we need clarity on that one since he's introduced it.
Around adults. So as a mandated reporter, we must report anything on children, but if someone tells me this is what has happened in their home, I don't have I'm not saying that has to be reported.
Right.
Because we're talking about 2 adults, that's not our purview.
I don't mean to take us way off line here, but it just occurred to me, is board member Delana now a mandated reporter?
No, she's not 16.
That would be a responsibility that you should know that you have, if that was the case.
All right. Thank you very much.
So we will bring back GAMA and GAMC, moving forward for work session for next month. GAHB will be a structured protocol, build.
Thank you, Ms. Lynch. We look forward to the conversation next month in our work session on these policies. Thank you, board members, for the discussion. This concludes our pre-work session. We return for the work session. We'll move right into the work session. Okay. All right, thank you for joining us today for our monthly work session. The board chair, Dr. James Curtin, cannot be present today, so as the vice chair, I will be presiding. Dr. Whitaker, please introduce our first presentation.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sultan. I would like to call on Mrs. Frances Holt, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, to provide the state of the division for 2024.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Dr. Sultan, esteemed members of the board, Student Board Representative Delana, Superintendent Dr. Dina Whitaker. Social work, wraparound services, Decatur Student Centers, Section 504, school psychology, ESOL, federal programs, special education, behavior intervention, and student code of conduct are the support areas housed within the Student Support Services Division. This division was created in January 2024 with a focus on aligning and enhancing existing support services across the district. The scope is both deep and wide. Since there is not enough time today to give you updates on every aspect, this afternoon you will hear about areas of focus associated with strategic goals and key actions that have been or are being taken to continue to strengthen support systems. Many of the artifacts of our comprehensive work align with the building and sustaining an engaging and inclusive culture accelerator. However, deep down we know that our division touches all areas of the strategic plan. After the September board meeting, with your support, we launched the design year of a comprehensive social emotional learning, SEL framework. I am pleased to report that we are on track with the timeline for deliverables related to the IFs in our SEL theory of action. As you know, a comprehensive needs assessment was conducted to evaluate past and current SEL practices in CSD. Key insights were obtained which help us understand successes, challenges, and growth areas. The results of this assessment will also inform future components of our SEL work as we bring the theory of action to life. You have a copy of the CNA results provided as an addendum to this presentation. The CNA results have been analyzed by various groups, including all principals and all of the superintendent's council groups. Not surprisingly, the most enlightening analysis and recommendations have come from the students, reminding us that student voice is key in this process. Additionally, the student council groups participated in informing the development of SEL standards and have provided us feedback on how we can implement a comprehensive framework. By the end of this month, we will have finalized the 612 CSD SEL standards, and we'll have a newly selected, high-quality, evidence-based SEL curriculum. Next semester, among other things, we will finalize the 612 logistics, develop scopes and sequences, and select the K5 SEL standards. As you will see in my upcoming slides, the launch of the SEL framework could not have come soon enough, as our discipline data continues to validate that the effective needs of our students are not yet fully met. Overwhelmingly, the stakeholders have told us that we need to have consistent implementation of SEL programming across schools in order to address uneven experiences for students. Students need moments of social emotional learning. Instead, we need momentum by ensuring that SEL is thoroughly integrated within the school day, mixing with academics, and providing opportunities to practice skills with a curriculum that adapts to the student's developmental needs. At the end of last school year, the total number of ISS and OSS incidents was 366. Noting that we are tracking completed referrals from July 30th to November 4th, 166 incidents resulted in ISS or OSS. We also note that ISS for half a day or less is not included in this data, as this data only reflects state reportable ISS and OSS. The breakdown by school is Decatur High School, 133, Beacon Hill Middle School, 18, Upper Elementary, 9, Lower Elementary, 6. The key takeaway is that in comparison to last school year, OSS and ISS incidents remained overall stagnant, as well as the number of disabilities. As shown on the graph, you can see that the majority of incidents resulted in a resolution of ISS, and that OSS. The breakdown by race shows that Black students continue to be involved in greater numbers of discipline-related incidents than white students. However, both Black and white students are being suspended in greater numbers than last year. This increase can be explained by how CSD, like many other districts, are responding firmly to serious and chronic behaviors after the tragedy in Appalachia at the beginning of this school year. Even so, our goal is to reduce ISS and OSS combined incidents by 5% for Black students and students with disabilities is continuing, as does our commitment to support schools in improving their school climate. At the end of last year, we met this goal, and we were able to decrease combined incidents for Black students by 13% and 5% for students with disabilities. The total from the end of last year are our baseline numbers for this year. To reach another 5% reduction, our goal is to have no more than 242 combined incidents for Black students and 105 incidents for students with disabilities. Key actions in place to support schools with this goal include training for all school administrators on the newly revised Code of Conduct, which includes a rationale for exclusionary discipline and a continuation of discipline consultations required for all out-of-school suspensions, as well as any in-school suspension beyond 2 days. School teams continue to examine internal practices around multi-tier system of support and problem-solving behavior concerns with the use of evidence-based behavioral interventions to teach alternative behaviors. Lastly, to build the capacity of school-based staff, teachers, and bus drivers to understand and better respond with empathy to students who have been impacted by trauma, CSD partnered with the Georgia Center for Child Advocacy and trained select school-based staff to be trainers in the trauma-informed curriculum called Connections Matter. We're also strengthening Tier 1 by continuing to work on creating positive school climates at each school by implementing positive behavioral interventions and supports, PBIS. Each school year, the Georgia Department of Education recognizes districts and schools that exemplify best practices in the implementation of PBIS. This year, 6 CSD schools, Claremont, Oakhurst, Winona Park, Glenwood, Westchester, and Beacon Hill, achieved operational status. Being recognized as having operational status means that those schools met 4 out of 4 outcome data measures pertaining to the percentage of students at Tier 1 for state reportable Office of Discipline Referrals, or ODRs, the number of state reportable ODRs per 100 students, the number of ISS days per 100 students, and the number of OSS days per 100 students. As evidenced by the growth in the number of schools participating and the number of schools that have achieved the 80% staff participation rate on the self-assessment survey, school staff and administrators realize the importance of their input in positively influencing school climate. Additionally, Oakhurst and Westchester are eligible to participate in a 3-part training that teaches PBIS teams how to establish systems and data components needed to ensure that Tier 1 classroom PBIS practices are implemented with fidelity. And finally, also this year, CSD has worked in collaboration with the Georgia Department of Education and MRESA to begin planning towards Georgia MTSS, which is a multi-level prevention system designed to meet the needs of the whole child by implementing a continuum of tiered supports for behavior, academics, and well-being. While this year is our planning year, we expect to fully transition towards GA-MTSS at the beginning of next school year. For the 3rd consecutive year, CSD has utilized the 3rd edition of the Behavior Assessment System for Children Behavioral and Emotional Screening System, or the BAS3-BEST, to screen for social, emotional, and behavioral risk in students. The data for this screener creates an evidence-based pathway for students to receive additional support, provides information that helps schools focus their efforts, time, and resources on students who have the greatest needs, and aids school in making big-picture programming decisions to support students. The BEST is a screener that helps put students on the radar of staff, students who might not otherwise be there. As we add additional grade levels to the administrations, we strive to keep participation rates at 90% or higher. And as you can see, we're meeting this goal. The fall administration of the BEST just occurred from October to November for all students in grades 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, and 10. On this graph, you can see that more students screened at normal, risk, and fewer screened as elevated risk and extremely elevated risk in comparison to previous administrations. Following each administration, members of the Student Support Services team at the school level follow up with students who have been rated elevated or extremely elevated for risk, contact families, and discuss screening outcomes, and make referrals as appropriate for support staff or community support. The CSD Wraparound Supports team is comprised of 19 school counselors, 4 student center counselors, and 4 social workers. The school counselors and student center counselors have tailored support by creating a pyramid of services to meet the needs of all students. In an effort to better serve the CSD students and their families, the counselor referral process has been streamlined this year to ensure that students with the greatest needs are afforded the opportunity to meet with their counselor in a timely manner. School counselors participate in an array of professional learning to ensure that their skill levels equate to the service needs of the students. This year, one such training was the Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training, or ASSIST, which empowers counselors with the tools to help keep students safe once and if they verbalize thoughts or planned actions for suicide. School social workers have immersed themselves in multiple aspects of student and family support, but this year, their focus has been primarily on school needs and providing targeted attendance support. District personnel have been working to strengthen the provision of wraparound services across the district by creating standard operating procedures for threat assessment and BART alerts, revisiting a comprehensive mandated reporter protocol, and offering multiple parent engagement and education opportunities. 2 recent opportunities include a workshop on the BAS-3 vest and the Drug Awareness Parent Seminar, which occurred during Red Ribbon Week. The English to Speakers of Other Languages, ESOL, and Federal Programs Department provide support that oversees federally funded grant programs of Title I, II, III, IV, ESOL, and McKinney-Vento. Also, the department is currently managing a grant from the Office of Refugee Settlement to support refugee families within our community. Title I provides extra intervention for students identified via academic needs with success measured through progress monitoring, and universal screener scores. This slide shows the percentage of students receiving Title I support and meeting the MAP growth targets at the end of last school year. In an effort to better align this with the needs of each school, Title I plans were developed collaboratively with the principals and in conjunction with each school improvement goals. Title I grant funds are currently allowing us to serve students at Claremont and Talley in reading and or math. In ESOL, we have approximately 112 K-2 students, with the top 3 languages being Arabic, Dari, and Farsi, different languages, but both from Afghanistan, and Somali. The results here indicate that 69% of students in our ESOL program are showing typical or high growth as compared to their peers on the Access Test, a Georgia annually required assessment. In an effort to continue to increase quality instruction for the students in this program, the department adopted the English 3D, a K-12 English language development program that helps students build academic language in writing, discourse, vocabulary, and communication. And McKinney-Vento, which ensures enrollment and support for students experiencing homelessness, also providing resources to remove educational barriers, another area in our department. Recently, we have updated the needs assessment to identify challenges and prioritize the needs of students and their families who are served in this program. A new referral form is now available. And at this point in the year, we have about 50 students, K-12 students, served under McKinney-Vento. The special education department in the City Schools of Decatur is serving approximately 540 students at this time, with the top 3 identified disabilities being specific learning disabilities, other health impairments, and autism. These categories represent a diverse group of students with unique needs, and our department is committed to providing individualized support to ensure their academic and social success. For this school year, we are focusing on several key initiatives aimed at improving student outcomes. First, we are proud to announce that we are now a special education accredited district. This distinction allows us to actively involve our students in a range of athletic abilities, fostering both physical, developmental, and social skills. Students will have the chance to participate in various sports, gain confidence, and develop teamwork abilities. These efforts will culminate in a district-wide Special Olympics event scheduled for March 2025. Next, in alignment with the science of reading, the department has begun implementing decodable readers from Just Right Readers. These resources are designed to improve foundational reading skills for students pre-K through 7th grade, as well as being used in our adaptive curriculum classroom K-12. Decodable readers provide structured, accessible reading materials that allow the students to apply phonics skills in a meaningful way, promoting reading, fluency, and comprehension. This program is especially important for those students who struggle with reading strategies, ensuring that they have access to materials that meet their developmental needs and abilities. The department is also implementing the Council for Exceptional Children's vetted Life Curriculum Transition Program. This curriculum includes vocational training, independent living skills, and community-based instruction to ensure that students with the most significant disabilities are prepared for life beyond school, whether that would be to further education, employment, or independent living. We are also understanding the importance of supporting our teachers, particularly in where staff turnover rates are high and can impact student progress. To address this, with the support of MRESA, we are prioritizing teacher retention by offering targeted professional development and mentorship opportunities so that educators feel supported and confident in their roles. For Section 504 in school psychology, CSD is currently serving about 506 students with 504 plans. This is about 9% of our student population. 77% of the students are in the secondary grades, 18% in upper elementary, and 5% in lower elementary. The top three areas for 504 impairments are other health impairments, ADHD, other/medical, and specific learning disabilities, or dyslexia. At the beginning of the school year, we rolled out a new 504 module in our student information system that gives schools more insight and technical efficiency to write, implement, and monitor plans, as well as accommodations. In the area of school psychology, the district currently employs 6 psychologists. Because this is an area of high demand nationally, CSD has maintained a partnership with Georgia State University to place school psychology interns and practicum students. We currently have a doctoral level practicum student placed within our department. Last year, our school psychologists completed almost 200 comprehensive evaluations. This is an increase of 17 from the year before, and the number one disability identified is specific learning disabilities, followed by speech language impairment and other health impairments. This school year, the department is focused on creating uniform practices across all grade levels and schools to ensure equitable decision-making in the identification process. We also continue to contract with independent school psychologists to help us manage and meet these deadlines. In closing, I would like to say that I am grateful for the dedicated and hardworking team that keeps students at the center. I hope that this presentation has provided you with an overview of the important work being done and or supported by my division. Do you have any questions?
So first, just thank you for all of the work on this. A lot of this is fantastic, and I know it's been stuff we've really wanted to see happen for quite some time, so we really appreciate the hard work on this. Can we quickly take a look at slide 4? The one thing that stood out to me was that OSS and ISS data does not include less than a full day of ISS. And so the real metric that we care about here is really hours out of the classroom, right? It's non-instruction time. So what can we do, and this is broadly asking everyone, I think, but what can we do to get to that refined piece of information? The really tracking how many hours these kids are not in instruction due to discipline, which is really what we're trying to index on.
From a student information standpoint, that is not necessarily tracked because for student record, that we're required by Georgia DOE to report what we report. It would be hard to measure, we can't measure, and that's why we're trying to clean this data up. Because if we do that, we are in violation of student record and creating errors at the state, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would not remotely suggest that we try to record this information to also report to the state. That's not what I mean. But from an internal standpoint, if really what we're trying to affect is the amount of time those students are outside of the classroom, we should figure out how to evaluate how long those students are outside of the classroom. Not from a regulatory reporting standpoint, but this is just for our own ability to improve something that we want to improve.
Would the SWIFT system have that data?
The SWIFT is telling us, using the PBIS, telling us where incidents are happening. The teams can then look at that and say, okay, we're having a lot of incidents in the cafeteria at 8 o'clock in the morning. But it doesn't necessarily track how long or when a student is outside of the classroom for ISS.
But do we put the consequences in SWIFT?
There are consequences in SWIFT, but they are not reported to the state.
But so I am not looking for something that we report to the state. This is for us internal. If we are tracking that in SWIFT, can we get to that level of detail to be able to?
It's not the time out the classroom, it's not what's in SWIFT. So I'll be honest, in PBIS world, your time out of classroom is not the key performance indicator to determine whether or not you're operational or distinguished. That's not the journey or the path. And I do not know of a system that says, let me know how many hours a child is out of the classroom outside of what is required for state reporting or putting in a different system. So that would mean a third system for us. And so that's why I was like.
Yeah, I'm not actually pressing for a solution here. What I am challenging the administration to do, our objective as a board, I don't mean to speak for the board, so y'all step in, but our objective as a board is to lessen disparate discipline outcomes. And it is evident that we are actually not capturing all discipline outcomes. And so what I would want to avoid is a scenario where instead of giving full ISS, we do partial ISS, because I know that doesn't have to be reported, but actually the kid's out of the classroom for the same amount of time anyway. There is a need, I think, to close that little bit of a loop, not for the state, again, but just internally so that we know that we're moving it in the right direction.
Maybe what I'm hearing is when kids get ISS and OSS, maybe that's a little bit more straightforward. Maybe we can use the code of conduct as a guideline to figure out how those children are ending up with that as a disciplinary measure. And there's, truth be told, some of them are, their recidivism rate is high, so sometimes it's, 30% of these kids are turning back and forth. It's not a good thing, but it is the data that shows. But I'm unclear how an administrator, a principal, or a teacher would decide how a kid gets a half day, which those numbers fall through those cracks, versus a full day. So what would be the difference? And then maybe if we understood that, we could figure out, because you could get 2 half-days, and then we wouldn't know if you were in that repeat offender kind of cohort. And we also wouldn't know, you wouldn't get into these numbers at all. So I don't know if there's a way to know how teachers or administrators are deciding whether to do a half-day or a full day, or if that's embedded in the code of conduct. That's legitimately a question.
Yeah.
So, I want to clarify one thing, that half-a-day ISS can be reportable if it's tied to a state reportable action. So that is part of the data cleanup that Dr. Whitaker just spoke about, and I'm working very closely with our new director for data to make sure that those things are being addressed. However, in general, administrators are looking at the time of day when the incident occurs. If it's happening towards the end of the day, it might be just the last period, and the student is referred to ISS, then it's less than half a day, right? Then they're still going through the consultation process where they, right now, have to call me because I have a vacancy in my department, but we talk through that, like what part of the day is ISS and what is tomorrow going to be, and when is the student returning, and what's being done when the student returns. You know, are they going to the student center, or what other activities are happening to make sure that the right support team is involved. So it does depend on time of day, maybe the particular class. There are students that can go to ISS for a period and then return if that's so that is part of the, again, assuming that it's not a state reportable incident, then we have to go ahead and report, and that cleanup is happening.
But we are able to record when a less than full day ISS happens. So why would we just not make it as a matter of practice to always record that? Even if we aren't having to send it to the state, again, I don't want to go down that path, but why would we not just know that we have this number of less than whole day ISS?
I do have that. I mean, we have that. It's just, it's not here on this slide. It's not state reportable, and we're just presenting on the reportable.
Got it. Okay, so okay, that's helpful. So we do know how many less than full day ISS. Okay. I would request that metric be included going forward, just because I think that's something that I also want to be able to make sure.
I wasn't clear on the question, so I'm sorry. I thought you, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So do you want to see it by, the action? I know we couldn't report some of this, but Hunts, what are you trying to find out from getting the half-day ISS that isn't reported to the state versus the half-day ISS that is reported to the state?
I want to avoid the squeeze the balloon one area and have it blow up somewhere else. You track all of it so that you know I'm not moving kids that would have gotten full-day ISS now into half-day ISS, and it looks like we've solved the problem. What I want to make sure is we're looking at all of it.
when we report, so we report this twice a year.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have that data in the summary data that we do in May.
Great. I had two other real quick comments, actually, if that's possible, on slide number 5. I just want to make sure as we report, I know that we're saying our metric is 5% reduction, right? But in reality, that's 5% reduction, assuming the population of students stays the same. And so it really is a reduction on a percentage basis of the population, right? And so the scenario is if half the number of Black students are in the schools next year, a 5% reduction doesn't look great. It's actually probably a bad thing, right? And so the metric here, I'm going to challenge us to think about this metric in terms of ratio of population, not just a flat rate. Does that make sense? I mean,
yes,
it does matter if you...
The percentage of the total population of Black students in the school,
Yeah.
would have a different, would serve as a different.
Correct, correct.
I understand the mathematical difference.
And then slide number 10, very much kind of a similar thing. On slide number 10, I just think we need to know the N with some caveats, because if it's a very low number, we obviously don't want to be, making it identifiable. But I suspect in some of these cases, the number is so small that changes can be a little bit misleading, right? Like, if you have a very, very small n, being able to say that we have achieved a particular reduction, we may need more data than just that one snapshot. Does that make sense?
The annual SWD goals.
Yeah, like, what is the n? If this is 500 students and you have these kind of improvements, that's amazing. If it's 5 students and you have these kind of improvements, it's probably noise. And so that we just need to know roughly what we're looking at.
Are we still using restorative practices?
We are using the whole gamut, and we're adding, our SEL framework, which is about the foundation for it all.
And then, what grades are included in the Special Olympics?
So it's very specific criteria, and the Special Olympics of Georgia is for students with significant disabilities. It will be K-12.
Okay.
And I think the reason I asked the question to you, Hans, was because do we want to just look at numbers? I know certain things aren't reportable, right? But we understand why certain things are being reported to state. I think the presentation started with the fact that you have most school districts now, looking closely differently at safety. So is the number of ISS by itself, or the reduction of the percentage important, or are we also wanting to look at particular patterns? So, like you said, in the cafeteria in the morning, we might see there's a trend with the number here, but if it's also what's resulting, I think what I'm trying to ask is, do you also want to know what's resulting in the half-day ISS or that OSS, not just the number that's been reduced?
We can provide that in future. So to piggyback on, to piggyback on Hans's question. Yeah, so providing what would be the non-state reportable.
Right.
And what offenses they are at an aggregate level.
That's work we're going to be doing, because we do have to make sure that those things are being coded correct.
Exactly. And that, board, I'm gonna let you know, our data is only as clean as what goes in the system. And to be able to establish data governance, which is some of the work that is being done now, with now having a director in that role with the background, not only in Infinite Campus, but the understanding around that and those business rules that go with it. There are going to be some changes that we know we're having to make, and that's even from a communication to you all. It came a little later than it typically does, because the data and the governance of it and what is in the system is not necessarily as clean as it should be.
Let me just take a second to thank the administration for that work. This has been something I've wanted to see happen for a long time. It's been evident in the data that's been presented to us the last number of years that this is an issue, and I know from personal experience how hard it is to fix your data, so I really appreciate what y'all are going through, and thanks for taking it on. It's pretty thankless, and so I felt like maybe thanking you. Appreciate it.
Well, understand the work around one of the first things I said to you all is to have an interoperable data system. Well, when you're creating an interoperable data system, you then begin to see the holes in where data governance has not been in place. So all of that takes time to address. So thank you so much. You have in front of you some of the work from our SEL work, from what our students have said. So based on this year, we are at year 0, which is in the design. And so you can see here, I listened to our K-5 students and in the advisory as they unpacked the comprehensive needs assessment. And we talked about the definitions of self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and then asked them to draw or write. What does that look like in the classroom? And then even thinking to the 612 advisory, where they said, the key piece around the practice of social emotional learning is the teacher and whether or not the teacher has buy-in into social emotional learning. So as we are building this framework, I want you to know that there is a power in the adult. I believe Sophie echoed that earlier when we were talking about social emotional learning as well. So we are creating this environment, and we are going to need our adults to help us build and sustain that engaging and inclusive culture for all of our students. So, board, thank you for having that as something that we really do need to focus on.
I just want to add one thing. I would really like to see, the breakdown of, like, why the student got ISS, like the different reasons for why they got ISS, and then categorize them into more general categories, just because I think it can make, I don't know, because there was the numbers up there about, like, the percent they got ISS, but then why, I kind of.
A great suggestion.
That's exactly what Board Member Anderson was alluding to as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Holt. I want the community to know we review this data twice a year, in December and May. It is very important that the board implements what we are learning through our student outcome data is presented academic outcomes, but how our students are interacting with one another and adults in our district. Dr. Whitaker, please introduce the next presentation.
Thank you, Vice Chair Salton. I would like to call on Mrs. Jennifer Burton, Assistant, to provide an overview of our expansion in the early learning space.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Dr. Fulton, esteemed board members, student board representative Delana, and Superintendent Dr. Gina Whitaker. I'm excited to share an update on our plan to expand early childhood learning opportunities in the city schools of Decatur. The construction of the new Early Learning Center falls under the Organizational Effectiveness and Excellence Strategic Accelerator, but we know the outcomes of the Early Learning Center will reach all strategic accelerators. In 2017, the City Schools of Decatur purchased land from the Decatur Housing Authority with the promise to use the land for public school purposes. We have an opportunity to fulfill a promise. Our promise is to provide a high-quality child care program that will ensure kindergarten readiness for kindergarten on the very land that was taken from the Beacon Hill community. Beacon Hill, also known as the Bottom, was a thriving Black community established by freed enslaved people after the Civil War. It was a center of commerce, education, and community until the 1930s, when much of the land was condemned in favor of new public housing, leading to mass displacement. Fulfilling our educational promise is our equity work. Why do we believe that early childhood education is part of the solution to the significant disparities in our district? The research on the efficacy of early childhood education is robust, and it is clear that a high-quality early learning program is a key factor in ensuring student success in all areas. A few things to consider. Our brains develop most between birth and age 8. These are some of the most fertile years to learn and develop. Early learning can have a lifelong effect. Adults who participated in high-quality early learning were found more likely to be employed, have graduated from high school, and have higher earnings than those who did not. And it also makes economic sense. Nobel Prize-winning economist James Heckman shows that every dollar invested in quality early childhood can yield returns between $4 and $16. have shown savings in later intervention costs, and that's not even tackling the impact on family financial stability. Our project vision aligns with our district vision. We all know that at City Schools of Decatur, we strive to create an educational foundation that empowers students to realize their full potential, thrive as productive global citizens, ignite positive change, and create a more just and equitable world. But to bring that vision to life, all CSD students have a strong foundation starting at birth. We seek to build a best-in-class early learning center to transform access to high-quality early learning options for our families. I've shared the disparity in our academic data before, but I'd like you to consider some other data. A recent survey of families living at Decatur Housing Authority demonstrated that childcare is an impediment to career development for many families, with 20% of respondents reporting they were unable to progress their career or education due to childcare issues. In 2022, 48 students were not enrolled in an early childhood program, and that number is growing. Right now, we have 67 children living in the Decatur Housing Authority who are not enrolled in any early childhood education program at all. And this is the beginning of our equity gap. We also know that there are some wonderful early learning options in Decatur, including in our own district, but there is still more need. This need actually transcends our families that are economically disadvantaged. And this fall, to gauge interest in a new early learning facility, a majority of the 100 economically diverse families surveyed identified affordability and availability as key concerns. Here you'll see our current early learning enrollment. Of note is that we have wait lists at both College Heights and the Fraser Center in the birth to 3 classes. College Heights has a total of 166 children on the wait list, and Fraser has 18. Our new early learning center will bring our total early learning capacity to over 400. We plan to have a balance of children with private pay, reduced pay, and scholarships with a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 approach. The new Early Childhood Learning Center will fulfill the promise of Beacon Hill and bolster childcare access for all CSD families. The proposed Early Learning Center is expected to offer 13 classes, birth through pre-K, with flexible spaces to adjust to accommodate evolving needs. The building will serve between 135 to 150 students. College Heights is currently a model early learning center, and we plan to replicate its success by using the same curriculum. We'll focus on using conscious discipline, equity-focused instruction, and science of reading aligned practices. Because this early learning center will replace the Fraser Center, this new building will be the hub for the high school's teaching as a profession pathway as we expand this promising and needed pathway. This is a complex undertaking. With the needs of our district in mind, we've worked to develop a draft floor plan that will allow for the kind of high-quality programming our children deserve. Here is an aerial view of the conceptual design. We've worked to make the footprint modest to keep the building low profile and allow for continued greenery. We envision a sleek, modern, accessible, environmental-friendly building with a welcoming entrance, and a design that blends in with the surrounding buildings and fits the character of the meeting the needs of an early childhood facility. This is the first iteration of a conceptual design. Once the conceptual design is completed and approved, the architectural design firm will proceed with the schematic design phase, addressing architectural, structural, mechanical, and electrical components. The estimated budget for this project is between $15 and $22 million. This includes the construction, design, and consultant services, necessary site work, and the FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Funding a building project like an early childhood learning center requires a comprehensive approach to address both one-time capital expenses and ongoing operational costs. Developing a sustainable funding strategy for a new early learning center in the City Schools of Decatur involves leveraging multiple financial sources to ensure both the establishment and long-term operation of the facility. We call this diversified support structure a braided funding model. We are exploring all funding sources, including SBLOC, grants, donations, our general fund, and partnerships. Our communications team has launched the new Early Learning Center webpage, which can be found on the csdecatur.net website under Teaching and Learning. The community will find the information I've shared today, along with frequently asked questions and a dedicated email address to share an interest in partnership or ask questions. This webpage will be updated regularly after board and community meetings. Also, each of you has a one-pager in front of you that's been included as an addendum that provides project highlights at this point in the project. This gives you an overview of our next 6 months, including community engagement and design benchmark. In January, we'll host a Board of Education community meeting and continue to engage focus groups. By February, we will finalize our schematic designs, which will allow us to refine our budget estimates, and we'll connect with best-in-class early learning centers across the country. In March, we'll come back to the board with a quarterly update as we solicit proposals for construction management at-risk firms. In April, we will be in the pre-construction phase and host another community meeting. In May, we'll award the CMAR contract and begin planning our education plan for early childhood learning staff. We'll come back to the board in June with another quarterly update. So what's happening next? So to recap, here are our immediate next steps. Focus groups are beginning this week with early childhood learning staff. We invite our community to attend the community meeting at Glenwood on January 22nd at 5:30 p.m., which will focus on the new Early Learning Center. And we're continuing our relationship building and strategy around obtaining funding. In February, we'll be partnering to learn from some of the best early childhood learning sites across the country that align with our vision for programming and architecture. By fulfilling our promise to use this land for public school purposes, we also create opportunity in the space currently held by the Fraser Center at Decatur High School. While this space won't be available for several years, we're considering athletic needs as well as the expansion of our CTAE offerings. We'll use our strategic plan as our guide in developing a plan for this space when it becomes available. The research and our district data tell us that this is the right work and we need everyone's help. Please spread the word and rally others to champion this transformative work. Partner with us or help us find donors. As we say in CSD, we are all in, and we invite our Decatur community and beyond to be all in too. This is our moment and opportunity to truly serve our community. Let's expand the great early childhood learning work that's happening across our district and make it accessible to our community that needs our support the most. I'm prepared to answer questions.
So just running through the numbers really quickly, the wait list for College Heights and the Fraser Center plus DHA is about 250 total students. We're looking at maybe 160 incremental with this, which means we'll still have wait lists when all is said and done. So I just want to administration how we're gonna ensure the availability to the extent possible is preserved for the highest needed students coming out of the, DHA.
Yeah. So, our programming would be 1/3 of our seats would be reserved for DHA. Proposed 1/3 of the seats would be reserved for Fraser, because we're gonna move Fraser over, and then 1/3 would be for full pay. And so by that reserved, I also would love scholarship, meaning those families would not pay to have their children to attend.
In terms of financing, I know we probably aren't in the weeds of this yet, but I don't know if things like GO bonds or other bonding mechanisms, COPS, whatever the other capital, allocation programs might be available, that is all kind of being looked at. Fantastic. And then the last thing I would say, two things on this. One, can we definitely say draft here so we don't have people freaking out about whether they're finalized on it or not?
Yeah.
And then two, I think there is some value in mentioning that we are preserving a pretty significant chunk of it, and just making sure that that is also reflective of the community's wishes.
One question about the web page. Did you say there's a section where people could provide questions or feedback? Okay, thank you.
What ages does the Fraser Center service?
They serve 0 to 3.
0 to 3.
Mhm.
Okay, I was just wondering, is it possible, once this is finished, there may be families we wouldn't have space for them for everybody who came from the Fraser Center?
Oh, no, we have enough space. So Fraser serves about 60 children.
Mhm.
So we will take all of those 60, which will leave about 100, right under 100 additional spaces for the new early learning center. But yes, they will come from Fraser.
And another key piece is the children who we're probably going to serve may be in utero right now. So, like we don't, that's the key. Yeah, so we have a couple years before we will know. But yes, Fraser will be fully engulfed into this.
Okay, so when we say 1/3 of the Fraser Center, what do we mean by that?
No.
So the total early learning center will have, about 1/3 will be, so 1/3 of our early learning center will be from the Fraser Center. 1/3 will be full pay, and then 1/3 will be scholarship or from DHA.
So basically taking the 150 and dividing it by 3.
So mathematically, it means that we're actually going to be lessening the number of Fraser Center available spaces. Right, because 1/3 is 50 spots,
Yeah.
not the 60.
Yeah, but with attrition and people move, like when we make that move, it would not be surprising that a couple of people don't select the early learning center or.
But then there's also some number of the 67 kids in DHA that are gonna be Fraser Center age kids that would need to be able to access that. I'm just a little bit concerned about, Jana's maybe concerned about the math.
I mean, so the building is built for about 150 feet and 50. And so 50 from DHA, 50 from Fraser, and 50 for full pay.
And, because a lot of teachers use the Fraser Center, right?
Mm-hmm. That's mainly
right.
There.
So I'm just wondering if there is a way to, I mean, once the Fraser Center is gone, it's gone for, like that 50 from Fraser. Who are those people really? But mostly teachers, right?
May I ask a question about the numbers?
Well,
Because we're using the existing phrase, I'm sorry.
So Fraser is currently staffed children. That's basically who
Right.
uses Fraser. Right now, there are about 60 children there. Their enrollment, definitely varies.
Right.
But 2027, Fraser will no longer meet over at the high
Right.
school, but they will be in the new facility.
So will teachers get any type of priority to placement? Within that Fraser,
Yes, yes, well, that's it, it would still be, just like you're preserving 1/3 for DHA, you would preserve 1/3 for what would be Fraser Center, current enrollment. So yes, it's about reserving seats and spaces for, one, our teachers. That is an added benefit, you know, for here in Decatur, that our staff can have their children at the Fraser Center.
I think what I wanted to ask was about the numbers. So if we have 60 Fraser Center students right now, then maybe we need to know how many are infants, how many are 3 years old, because in a year or 2 years, the 3-year-olds will now be 4-year-olds. So unless we're certain that the staff, for example, will have a consistent number of children that age, and I'm not sure how we do that, but we're talking right now about 60 students at Fraser Center, correct? Those students age. So as they don't age.
No, they're gonna grow up, so they would not come, those 66 children probably wouldn't be in this building anyway, because the children we will really serve are currently in utero,
Right.
because they're not born yet, or maybe an infant.
So I think to the questions that I'm hearing about the numbers and how, because I think what we're realizing is we have a need for this center. And even when we build it, we're still going to have younger children in our district that will not be able to attend. And I heard on NPR today, I think the class of 2025 is the largest, and we go down again. So are we looking out 3-5 years to see what we're looking at? We'll always have some staff that'll have young children, and we'll always have some young children here, and that might answer maybe to some of the other questions regarding Fraser Center children.
My follow-up question would be, does the Fraser Center have pre-K right now?
No.
So it looks like this model is gonna incorporate pre-K, like College Heights has. I'm not sure how many pre-K classes you're thinking about, you don't have to answer. But I wondered if maybe we had thought about what that pre-K model looks like, especially, going into, kind of future years, I guess, like we were talking about, as the enrollment numbers look differently, and maybe where those pre-Ks are housed, if they potentially went back to their home schools, if that offloaded some space, for some of those waitlists. Don't kill me, it's just a thought, but,
Yeah.
now you're looking at absorbing the Fraser Center plus adding pre-K, which they didn't have before, it's just another
And you know,
thought.
the ability to have a pre-K, you know, it's dependent upon, you know, other agencies. So we have to go through all of those processes. So that's where it's very high level of a third, because we have a lot of work to do to be able to say how many pre-K classrooms we can actually have, because we have to apply with them through other agencies.
And this is where I think I would be a lot more comfortable if I saw some of those forecasts over time, just because now is the time for us to say, well, if we need 175 students instead of 150, now's the time for us to be talking about it. If we want this to be, instead of, 15 to 22, if we're talking about it 18 to 27, this is the time to be talking about it. I just don't want us to bake in it being too small, but then also, I don't want it to be much larger, because, the reality is enrollment is declining across the board, right? It is declining across the board, and so, just a little bit of sophistication behind those forecasts would go a long way.
And yes, it's so to provide what would be birth rate and things of that nature, because that is really what informs enrollment projections for the school system K-12, but at the same time, obviously would inform the birth through 5, so yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question about the 1/3 to 1/3 to 1/3 ratio. Does that ratio potentially fluctuate based on how many DHA apartment children need in the preschool, just because, I mean, right now there are 67, I think, that aren't enrolled because they can't afford it, or they can't get their kids there. Which means that if that preschool is built right now, so 17 kids wouldn't be able to go. If that 1/3 ratio is like stone solid.
Yeah. Nothing would be set in stone. So it wouldn't be, you know, it really comes down to need and funding. So it's complicated. But we definitely want to serve the kids that need it. And the important pieces are, then we have to find the funding for it. So, but that has been our priority in this project.
I would like to just start the public conversation about general fund subsidies for some of this, because I do absolutely believe the $1 to 4 to 16 return, the amount of money that we spend now in the general fund to try to close some of the issues that have been created because these children have not had these programs is catastrophic. I view it as fiscally responsible to fund some of this out of the general fund. So I just want to set that out there so the public hears it, and we can begin talking about this publicly. It's going to require an investment on the front end, but I think it pays dividends.
Thank you.
So we are hopeful that continued quarterly updates on funding, construction, and engagement will keep you well informed regarding this project. The project is envisioned as an evidence-based model demonstrating the power of what would be public-private partnerships, highlighting our collective investment in early education, and it would address systemic inequities. I am appreciative to have Danielle Gray, Associate Director of the Zeiss Foundation, present today. Zeiss has been very impactful in supporting student success in neighboring districts and also in Decatur. I believe this early learning initiative approach will inspire partnerships and other communities to replicate its future success, ensuring a lasting imprint and impact here in Decatur and beyond.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton, for the presentation. We look forward to the quarterly engagement on the topic of the new Early Learning Center. Also, I invite the community to engage in a two-way dialogue with the Board of Education on Wednesday, January 22nd at 6:30 p.m. at Glenwood Elementary School regarding the project. Dr. Whitaker, please introduce the next presentation.
Vice Chair Sultan, I would like to call on Mrs. Amanda Lynch, Chief of Staff, to review our governance team policy for first read.
Good afternoon, Dr. Sultan, esteemed members of the board, Student Representative Delana, and Superintendent Dr. Jima Whitaker. Today we have one policy on the agenda for work session. This is policy BBFB, Governance Teams. This policy was discussed in pre-work last month. It is being presented for first read. If approved for first read, this policy will be available for public comment through Assembly. Stakeholders can access any policies open for public comment on the right-hand side of the Assembly homepage. Assembly is linked on our CSC website under the board. For policy BBFB, Governance Teams, there were just a few minor wording revisions that were made to the draft that was discussed last month. This includes adding the word strategic plan as requested by the board during last month's discussion. This draft was then shared again with the SCLT when the superintendent met with the SCLT, which resulted in the addition of one additional word, the word mission, so that the policy reads that SLTs are responsible for complying and carrying out the mission and provisions of the district charter. That's the only feedback that they had. It was also shared with them that it would be shared tonight and shared with all SLT members at their annual governance training, that it would be available for public comment through Assembly if approved for first read tonight. May I read the recommendation? Yes, please. The recommendation being made is that City Schools of Decatur Board of Education accept policy BBFB Governance Teams for first read.
Do I have a motion to approve the recommendation to accept policy BBFB governance teams for first read?
So moved.
Any board member to second the motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mrs. Lynch, and thank you, Dr. Whitaker. We encourage the public to review this policy, which is posted on Assembly. And we will recess and return for our regular board meeting in 5 minutes. 4:50, which is in Ready? Good afternoon. Our board chair, James Herndon, cannot be present today, so as vice chair, I will be presiding. We will now call this meeting to order at 4:50 p.m. We ask that you silence all cell phones. We'll begin with a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. At this time, I ask that everyone join me in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Now I ask all who are able to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our mission is to inspire and enable student growth through meaningful and engaging learning experiences supported by highly qualified and caring educators in a safe and inviting environment. First on the agenda is approval of the meeting agenda for this meeting, December 2024. Board members, are there any revisions to the agenda this evening?
No.
Okay. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved.
All right, Board Member Utz approves the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Board Member Anderson makes the second. Any discussion? Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Our next agenda item is the approval of minutes from previous board meetings. Do I have a motion to approve November?
So moved.
Board Member Utz makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Johnson Davis seconds the motion. Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. All right, Dr. Whitaker, I see we have some guests who have joined us. Do we have recognitions tonight?
Yes, Vice Chair Sultan, to facilitate tonight's recognitions, I would like to call upon Deputy Superintendent Karen Newton Scott.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sultan, esteemed members of the. I have the pleasure of making several presentations this evening for College Heights Early Childhood Learning Center, Tally Upper Elementary, Beacon Hill, and 2 Decatur High School graduates. As we honor each group, please do not take your seats. Instead, we'd like you to stage along the wall to my left, your right, for a photo opportunity with our board members. At this time, I was going to invite Sarah Garland, principal of the Early Childhood Learning Center, to the front, but she is shaking her head no. Her honorees have not made it here this evening for unforeseen reasons, but we will still read them by honoring the highlights. College Heights proudly recognizes the dedicated individuals who form their instructional leadership team. These dedicated educators, selected by their peers, embody the heart and soul of our school community. They serve as the powerful voice of our staff, actively shaping our vision, setting ambitious goals, and driving transformative improvements in instructional practices. The instructional leadership team is committed to fostering a positive and equitable learning environment for all students. They collaborate with their colleagues, creating a culture of open dialogue and shared responsibility. By actively seeking feedback and valuing diverse perspectives, they ensure that every voice is heard and acknowledged. From participating in critical hiring decisions to welcoming visitors into their classrooms, the ECLC team members exemplify high standards of professionalism and dedication. They facilitate meaningful staff meetings, inspiring and empowering their colleagues and peers to reach new heights. We thank the outstanding educators for their invaluable contributions. That would be Annie Phillips and Meredith Broughton, as well as Aaron Matthews Davis, Ava Devereaux, Stella Sodat, Taylor Tate, and Denise Stapleton. We thank them all for their commitment to excellence and efforts to make College Heights an exceptional place for our students to learn and grow. Let's give them a round of applause in their absence. Okay. Knowing the fundamental importance of literacy and the impact of students' reading ability on their entire educational career, the Georgia Department of Education has recognized schools with exceptional achievement or growth in reading as literacy leaders. Schools were recognized for achievement or growth in the percentage of students reading at or above grade level. The criteria for the Literacy Leader Awards recognize the crucial importance of grade level reading in 3rd and 6th grades and require higher growth from schools with lower achievement levels. Awards were given at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. A total of 324 schools met the qualifications to be recognized as literacy leaders, and our very own Tally Upper Elementary School was one of them. So we invite Principal Heaton to receive recognition as the 2024 Georgia Literacy Leader School in CSC. Thank you, Billy, and your team for moving the needle on literacy and changing the lives of the students you serve. Additionally, this award was given for math, recognizing the fundamental importance of mathematics in students' education and future careers. The Georgia DOE recognized schools with exceptional achievement or growth in math as math leaders. Schools were recognized for achievement or growth in the percentage of students scoring at proficient learning level or above in mathematics. The 2023 Math Leader Awards criteria recognize the crucial importance of numeracy skills and 5th and 8th grades and require higher growth from schools with lower achievement levels as well. This award was given again at the elementary, middle, and high school levels, and a total of 624 schools met the qualifications to be recognized as math leaders. And our very own Beacon Hill Middle School was among those receiving this recognition. We invite Principal Thomas, Dr. Julie McFadden, Angela Profit, and Sarah Coleman to receive recognition as 2024 Georgia Math Leader School. We applaud the hard work that has resulted in these accomplishments recognized by these prestigious designations. Now for our Decatur graduates, I'd like to invite Wes Hatfield, Assistant Principal of Decatur High School, Heidi Watley, Director of the Virtual, Kim Jones, our lead school counselor, to the front, being that way. Okay, for recognition of our Decatur High School graduates. Graduating high school is a significant milestone in life. Tonight, we have the honor of recognizing 2 exceptional students who will graduate at the end of December and transition to the next phase of their lives. They have reached this moment through hard work, dedication, and perseverance, and we are thrilled to celebrate their achievements. As they embark upon their new journeys, let us take a moment to honor all that they have accomplished and wish them continued success in their exciting adventures. First, we will honor Caleb Alexander Lanier. Come on up front. Caleb, your teachers have shared that working with you over the past year and a half at Decatur Virtual Academy has been a true pleasure. Your positive attitude and active contributions to the online community have made a lasting impression. They've also been impressed with how well you've balanced academics and athletics. Today you stand before us having met all the requirements for graduation with honors and ready to pursue your dream of playing college football at Duke University. Congratulations. Not yet, Caleb, I'm still working on it. Still honoring you. Congratulations on your athletic scholarship, and may you achieve all your dreams. We know you will be successful at Duke. Okay, and our second graduate is Madison Davis. He is
Still in transit.
okay. We will read Madison's recognition, and if she makes it before we're done, then we'll make sure to call her up and get her picture and all of those things. Okay, Madison, Decatur High School is proud of your dedication to earning your high school diploma through both Decatur High School and Elizabeth Andrews High School. You have demonstrated remarkable resilience and the ability to stay focused on goals. During Madison's time at Elizabeth Andrews High School last year, she earned 10.5 credits in work-based learning, English, math, science, and social studies, an achievement that is truly outstanding. We look forward to Madison's continued success in the automotive field, and we are here to support her as she transitions to the next exciting phase of her life. If one of her family members her information, we'll give you a round of applause. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite our board members and Dr. Whitaker to join us for photos with our honorees.
Caleb, here, walk us out. Get in the middle.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thanks, great.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Come on. Congratulations. Congratulations. Yes, you want your cap on? Do you want your cap on? No. No? No. Okay. Thank you. No. Congratulations. Congratulations.
You're gonna get in the middle.
Like, I thought you were coming by me. We don't bite you. We don't bite you. We really don't. Okay. You're speaking it. Okay. Congrats. Yeah, of course. All right. Thank you. We have to widen a little bit, spread out a bit.
Just a little bit, we can put y'all, you wanna get in the middle?
Derek can be in the middle.
You wanna be in the middle?
Only in the middle.
Okay, well then.
All right, we'll scoot back in.
That basketball. Awesome.
All right, congrats, guys. Congratulations.
Yeah, here's
You mean like? Right, yeah,
He's looking like. Wait a second. Check these now.
Yeah.
Dr. Whitaker, do you have a report tonight?
Yes, Vice Chair Sultan, I do. On Friday, the Georgia Department of Education released the College and Career Readiness Performance Index. Under the federal Every Student Succeeds Act, otherwise known as ESSA, each U.S. state is required to have a statewide accountability system that complies with federal requirements, providing information on how well schools are performing. The CCRPI meets the requirement in Georgia and satisfies requirements for school accountability in state law. The Board of Education, in collaboration with the community, has developed the strategic plan, All Indicator, Many of the key performance indicators of student success in all areas are measured using components of CCRPI. Therefore, this presentation is a true reflection of progress made towards fulfilling the objectives of the strategic plan. The CCRPI measures school, district, and state performance on 5 components. The first is content mastery, which includes student scores on statewide assessments in English language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. The second component, progress, measures how much growth students demonstrate in English language arts and mathematics, and how well English learners are progressing toward English language proficiency. The closing gaps component measures how well schools meet annual improvement targets for subgroups. The fourth is readiness, which includes literacy scores, student attendance, and percentage of students succeeding for instruction, accelerated enrollment, pathway completion, and college and career readiness measures. And then there is the graduation rate, which is a high school component including both the 4th and 5th year graduation rates. The CCRPI no longer includes an overall 0 to 100 score for schools, districts, or the state. Each component still has a score of 0 to 100 though. The Department of Education has communicated that this change was made to increase transparency and provide a more complete picture of school performance, ensuring that challenges and opportunities are not hidden behind a single score. State legislation passed in 2024 requires the Governor's Office of Student Achievement, otherwise known as GOSA, to calculate a single score for schools and districts, and for the Georgia Department of Education and the local school district to publish these scores online. CSD will publish GOSA's single score for our district and schools as soon as they are made available. So let's dive into the components. Content mastery addresses whether students are achieving at the level necessary to be prepared for their next grade, college, or career. For content mastery, City Schools of Decatur is number 2 in the state and number 1 in the metro for both elementary and middle schools. The high school's content mastery score has also increased from last year, moving them to second in the metro and 7th in the state. Our teachers are continuing to focus on the teaching of the Georgia Standards of Excellence. Both elementary schools met all targets. Where you see a green flag, the target was met. If there is a yellow star in the flag, the subgroup met the improvement target. If a flag is not present, there are too few students in the school to actually calculate that score. Content mastery in our secondary schools also indicates that we have met our accountability targets for our subgroups. For middle school, the Georgia Milestones Assessment Test, as well as the 2024 Georgia Alternative Assessments for students as GAAs, are included in the Content Mastery Score. For high school Content Mastery Score 2023, middle school algebra end of course, 2024 high school end of course and retest, as well as the 2024, the 2023-24, also IB, AP, and IB history are included. And you can see their flags there. Progress. Progress measures how much growth students demonstrate in English language arts and mathematics, and how well English learners are progressing toward English language proficiency. Students obtain growth percentiles, which indicate how their current achievement compares with that of statewide academic peers who had similar histories. All schools increased in student growth for ELA. 3 out of the 4 schools increased student growth in math. And kudos to the staff and the students at Beacon Hill Middle for ELA growth at 11.25 percentage points, and at Decatur High School for math for 8.53 percentage points, and at Tally for English language learners at 14 percentage points. Closing Gaps sets the expectation that all students and all student subgroups make improvements in achievement rates. This component is based on CCRPI improvement targets for academic achievement, which are also represented by improvement flags, and it provides an opportunity for schools to demonstrate the progress made in improving student performance among all subgroups. Mathematically, the amount of improvement stays constant and is added to the previous year's subgroup score to determine the target score each year. So, we will not rest on these scores and continue to improve. As indicated on this slide, all schools met subgroup targets in Closing Gaps in ELA. Closing Gaps is the only CCRPI component that is not comparable this year to last year. That is because we have new K-12 math standards and targets are in the process of being established this year using the 23-24 as the baseline. Elementary schools achieved a score of 100%. However, there is opportunity for growth in the content of science for economically disadvantaged and English language learners. Mathematically, the amount of improvement stays constant and is added to the previous year group to determine that target score for each year. So once again, we will not rest on these scores, but continue to improve. Our secondary schools show a bit more variety in their policies. At the middle school are with Hispanic students and once again, economically disadvantaged students in science. I am seeing a pattern. The red flag in U.S. history is not a surprise. When we presented the Georgia milestone results earlier this year, we knew U.S. history needed to be addressed. We have put systems of support in place through PLCs and pacing to address the root causes of the flag. Finally, improvement targets without stars coincide with the need to bolster our MTSS processes as on-track and off-track data assist us with drilling down to the student and the need. Readiness measures whether students are participating in activities that prepare them for and demonstrate readiness for the next level, college or career. The indicators for elementary and middle schools include at or above grade level reading, student attendance, and beyond the core. For our elementary students, 88.93% are reading at or above grade level. That is an increase from last year from 1.43 percentage points. And yes, the aggregate math, the subgroup performance, where Black students are reading at 65.55%, but that is an increase from 55% last year. Economically disadvantaged students percentages are up from 43% to 57%. Is this where we want to be? No. But there is improvement, and that is significant. Likewise, for middle school, Black students reading at or above grade level increased from 62% to 68%, and economically disadvantaged students reading at or above grade level increased from 52% to 63%. High school readiness indicators include at or above grade level reading, student attendance, accelerated completion, and college and career readiness. If board members remember, I asked what it would mean for us not to have only 38% of our economically disadvantaged students reading at or above grade level last year. Now, 54.95% of economically disadvantaged students are reading at or above grade level this year. Once again, not where we want to be, especially since these students will graduate in a year and a half, but we are making strides. Finally, our graduation rate measures whether students are graduating from high school with a regular diploma in 4 or 5 years. Last year's graduation rate was 95.1%, and now it is 95.4%. This indicator is only at the high school level, but is a part of CCRPI. In conclusion, I want to remind the board and the public, CSD will publish GOSA's single score for our district and schools as soon as they are available. Each CCRPI component has a 0 to 100 score for schools and districts. There is an addendum to this presentation which presents all CCRPI scores in 2023 and 2024. Out of the 13 components, all but 2 are now over 90. I must thank our dedicated teachers and staff for their commitment to academic excellence and student success. This year's college and career readiness measurements reflect the progress CSD is making in narrowing the achievement gap and preparing students for life beyond high school. Finally, I'm going to actually pass something to you. I am thrilled to close my remarks and the first semester of this school year with an exciting announcement. About 4 months into my tenure as superintendent, I met with the leadership of the Chick-fil-A Foundation and submitted a proposal that you have in front of you that would assist us in taking CSD from a good school district for most students to a great school district for all students. The proposal emphasized that CSD shared the Chick-fil-A values of adapting and reinventing how we do things to achieve great outcomes, the necessity and the urgency for finding new ways to ensure equity in student achievement for every student, and a belief that we will achieve the greatest and fastest outcomes by investing in the development of our school leaders and district leaders. The proposal was requesting funding for the professional development of leaders through the University of Virginia's Partnerships for Leaders in Education program, UVA-PLE. The UVA-PLE combines the most innovative leadership advancement practical expertise and the proven methodologies from both business and education, the Darden School of Business and the Curry School of Education. Their world-class organization emboldens education leaders to cultivate systemic change to enhance the conditions where school communities achieve remarkable results. UVA-PLE also emboldens and equips leadership teams to create and implement shifts critical to addressing inequities and fostering remarkable student and school advancement. The ultimate effect is more equitable, inclusive, and an excellent school system. On Friday, I received an email from the Chick-fil-A Foundation notifying me that CSD has been awarded a grant of $200,000 to advance our efforts. The leadership development will be focused on our 4 UVA PLE schools: Fifth Avenue Upper Elementary School, Tally Street Upper Elementary School, Beacon Hill Middle School, and Decatur High School. And if you realize, those are also the 4 schools that I just presented on. We are tremendously grateful to the Chick-fil-A Foundation for their generosity and partnership in developing strong leaders who cater to the unique needs of every student. Together, we will ensure equitable outcomes for all students, providing a beacon of hope for the students who need most. Vice Chair Sultan, that completes my report, and I wish everyone an enjoyable and restful winter break.
Thank you, Dr. Whitaker. Good evening. On behalf of the City Schools of Decatur Board of Education, thank you for joining us in person and virtually. Your engagement in the success of our students is appreciated. It's December, which means this will be our last Board of Education meeting until next year. During today's pre-work, we continued our book study on the governance core, school board, superintendents, and schools working together. A revision to the drug-free workplace policy was presented for board feedback, along with the initial draft of policies on staff political activities and staff responsibilities to report criminal charges to employers. There were 2 presentations during the work session. The first was an update on the state of the student support services. The second presentation, the board and public got an update on the planning underway for a new early childhood learning center, including a programming plan, the projected budget, and a first look at conceptual design. We also accepted a policy on school governance teams for the first read. The presentations for all board meetings are available on the district's website in Assembly. While you're there, I invite you to listen to the October and November board meetings for discussions on direct fiscal impact of House Bill 581 on CST, which creates a statewide floating homestead exemption as an inflation cap on property tax assessments. More than 55% of voters in the city of Decatur approved HB 581 as a constitutional amendment in November. However, the bill allows cities, counties, and school districts a one-time option to opt out of the property tax cap. The City Schools of Decatur Board of Education will follow the legal procedures to opt out of the exemption, including holding 3 virtual public hearings, 2 on January 14th, 1 in the morning and 1 in the evening, and 1 in the evening of January 21st. Recognitions have become a highlight of monthly meetings. The board looks forward to celebrating our schools and the achievements of our students and staff. This evening, we had the pleasure of hearing about the invaluable contributions of 2 teachers at College Heights Early Childhood Learning Center, celebrated the recognitions of Tally Street and Beacon Hill by the Georgia Department of Education as the statewide literacy and math leaders, and the accomplishments of 2 Decatur High School students who will graduate early at the end of this month. We wish them well in their post-secondary pursuits and congratulate all students and staff on their achievements. Over the next 2 weeks, I know our schools will be ringing with cheer from incredible winter performances and various celebrations. Enjoy the upcoming break, everyone. We look forward to welcoming you back in the new year. Finally, our next board meeting will be Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. And that concludes my remarks for this evening. Board members, do you have any thoughts that you wish to share?
Yes.
Please.
So this is in regards to Dr. Whitaker's superintendent's report on CCRPI. And I just want to acknowledge at the beginning of this that I recognize we are not done. We have a long way to go. But I want to commend the superintendent and I want to commend the entire team for the work that has been done to date. This is the first time since I've been on this board, and frankly, probably since I've been paying attention, and I marked that around 2017, that I feel like we're watching the right things, that we have a grip on the data, and that we're taking the right steps to see changes. And this is the first time I've seen systemic improvement across the board on all of the metrics that we're trying to track. So I just finally feel like we're actually making meaningful change to help the students that for so long in this system have not received the support that they should have. There's plenty more to do, but I do feel it's important to acknowledge that, so thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll just second that and say thank you to Dr. Whitaker, everyone that I'm looking at, and all the teachers and administrators. I understand it takes everyone, so I appreciate it.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you. Dr. Whitaker, please introduce the next presentation.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sultan. I would like to call on Dr. Lonita Broom, Chief Financial Officer, to present the mid-year budget adjustment.
Good evening, Vice Chair Dr. Sultan, esteemed members of the board, student representative Delana, and Superintendent Dr. Whitaker. The district has been in operation for 6 months, and we have had an opportunity to analyze current financial operations and trends. Based on the analysis, it has been determined that there is a need to amend the current fiscal year 25 general fund budget. The fiscal year 25 budget amendment has an impact on all 4 strategic accelerators with a specific focus on organizational effectiveness and excellence through financial equity and transparency of district funds. The Operations Division is requesting approximately $2 million in mid-year budget requests. The $2 million in requests includes increased costs for energy, custodian usage, and supplies, modular rentals, and funds for the maintenance of buses that are no longer on contract or warranty. Additionally, nutrition revenue is coming in less than projected, and it is estimated that the general fund may have to supplement the school nutrition program by approximately $520,000. With the exception of the request for 2 maintenance technicians for the Legacy Park track and field, will be funded by reallocating funds saved from personnel vacancies to operations. The request for the 2 maintenance technicians, which is inclusive of salary and benefits, for Legacy Park track and field, will satisfy the requirements of the district to provide routine and preventive maintenance as specified in the intergovernmental agreement between the district and the city. The $114,363 will be funded by deducting funds from the district's fund balance. Human Resources and Information Services Division are requesting a combined total of approximately $207,000. Human Resources requests include a system to digitize human resources records to allow quicker access to data, consultants for compensation and professional services, a position upgrade, and an exit survey terminated employees. Technology requests include the adoption of a cybersecurity framework, a safety and security consultant, and increased funding for safety and security maintenance and repair. Again, we are proposing that funds from vacant position savings be reallocated to cover these requests. Finance, the Superintendent's Office, student support, and the district are requesting a combined total of approximately $483,000. Finance is requesting a return on investment system to identify efficiencies in areas of opportunity to reduce costs for programs, and an upgrade in a position in the finance department to ensure equity among positions in the finance department. There is no fiscal impact of the upgrade. Superintendent's request is for an increase in attorney fees due to increased services for audit, investigation, and other services. Student support services request is for additional funds to cover the increased interest from teachers for ESOL endorsement. The district request includes various employee changes throughout the year that impact the budget. This includes teachers obtaining certifications, completion of advanced educational degrees, and new hires coming in with higher salaries than the average projected salary. The total midterm general fund budget request equates to $2,571,000 The funding source for $2,456,671 is to reallocate funds from general fund personnel savings. The funding source for $114,363,000, which is the two maintenance technicians for Legacy Park, track and field, is the general fund, is to be deducted from the general fund balance. On numerous occasions, the board has expressed their concerns with surplus funds left at the end of the year. Reallocating funds at the midterm will reduce the surplus that is traditionally left at the end of the year. In the last 5 years, the surplus for the general fund has averaged approximately $2 billion. The budget will be closely monitored, and if necessary, a second budget amendment will be presented to the board as needed. The fiscal impact of fiscal year 25 midterm budget amendment 1 is $114,363. As shown in the small box top right, the fiscal year 25 beginning unaudited fund balance is approximately $19 million. The amount that will now be deducted from the fund balance has increased by $114,363. The ending fund balance has also decreased by this amount and is now $16,279,008. The fund balance percentage is within the 4 to 15% board policy this year. I'm happy to respond to any questions you may have or provide clarification as needed.
Dr. Broom, 1 mil is about what, about $2.9 million right now. In general, I am not hugely concerned about $2.5 million adjustment on $107 million budget, about a 2% adjustment overall. But that's actually not what we're presented with here. This is a $1.9 million adjustment for operations alone, and a very, very small adjustment for the entirety of the rest of the budget. And so even if we subtract the $114,000, and I'll even grant the $520,000 from nutrition, I appreciate that we're beginning to try to be transparent about the subsidy the general fund pays into nutrition. We're still talking about 1.3 of an adjustment in a single department. That has to get tightened up. That's $500,000, basically, that's wrapped up in a single department. And if we think about it, that's what, a $9 to $10 million department. We're really talking about a 15% adjustment in one area. This is numbers that impact our ability to provide raises. This is numbers that impact our ability to staff at different levels. This is material. And so I want to make sure that when we are back here this time next year, we're not talking about a 15% adjustment in one area.
Yes, sir.
But now I do have a question. Sorry, Alex, every time you say something, it makes me think of something. And I think I asked something like this last year. So if we're looking at slide 6, and it says reallocation from general fund personnel savings. So that means that we had budgeted for personnel that we ended up either not getting, because there may not have been staff to fill that, or not needed.
That indicates that we anticipate at the end of the year from vacancies.
Yeah.
And from like employees being on leave, that we'll have about that much left in the budget.
So I guess to piggyback off of Hans's point, looking at the M&O adjustment she's asking for, I mean, how much of these could she really have anticipated? Like, some of them are inflation costs, and then some are related to Legacy Park. So, I mean, is there anything she really could have done?
Can we put the slide up?
It's your slide 3.
Yeah. A very common estimate, right? 3% inflation is a pretty typical number. So I don't know if this means that we underestimated inflation and need to add an additional 3%, or if it means we didn't estimate inflation. But inflation is actually down this year, it's not up. And so it concerns me that we aren't appropriately accounting for inflation in something that should just automatically have an inflationary budget estimate built into it. Every one of these other things, in my experience, are things you anticipate as a part of the budget process. The one exception is the $114,000 to the legacy park, because those are new positions that we did not have for contract at that particular point in time. But all of these others, I would expect to be able to anticipate as a part of a budget process. And what concerns me is, even if we didn't anticipate this as a part of a budget process, we did anticipate this going somewhere else in the budget that we are now saying we don't need in the budget. And so even if these weren't the things that we needed, why were these in the budget then in the first place?
Let me call Mr. Perez so he can expand it.
Well, I'm not sure that I'm necessarily needing a defense of it right now. I'm just saying that I want this tighter next year. That's my statement.
Last question, and I think is what you just asked, maybe is what I was thinking. So tell me if I misheard you, but so there are two things here: anticipate, but the second part was then why are we allocating funds for this personnel if it turns out we know we're not gonna need them?
100%.
But we don't know that we're not going to need it, because we don't know what positions will be. We don't know what employees will be, or what employees will go out on. I don't know.
But we know that it's not 15% in one department and 0 in the rest.
Thank you.
So Vice Chair Sultan and the board, we will use a modified zero-based budgeting approach to build FY 26's budget as well. Staff's capacity is increasing in this area of work, and I look forward to decreasing the need for adjustments in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Broom, and thank you, Dr. Whitaker. Please introduce the next presentation.
Vice Chair Thompson, I would like to call on Mrs. Amanda Lynch, Chief of Staff, to present the 2026-2027 academic calendar.
Good evening once again, Acting Chair Sultan, and esteemed members of the board, Student Representative Delana, and Superintendent Dr. Gina Whitaker. Today I am bringing to you a recommendation for the 2026-2027 academic calendar. First, I will provide you with the results of the stakeholder survey and how it informs the calendar being proposed. Of course, the development of the academic calendar aligns with our strategic accelerator focused on organizational effectiveness and excellence. Last month, I presented to you a proposed draft of the 2026-2027 academic calendar. This draft remains similar to past year's calendars, the current year calendar, and next year's already adopted calendar. I highlighted district priorities in last year's extensive survey results, and also relayed that we had heard a desire from teachers for a teacher workday to be embedded in the school year rather than just at the start or end of semesters. To gather feedback on the draft calendar, and specifically on the teacher-driven proposal to explore teacher workday options, a survey was made available to all stakeholders to complete from November 18th through December 4th. The survey was featured prominently on our website, communicated through the district newsletter, and shared with our superintendent council. Overall, we heard from 580 survey respondents. Our were our CSE parents and families, which made up 62% of our respondents. Next were CSE employees at 33%, which can be further broken down into 21% teachers and 12% being other school or district staff. 4% of survey respondents were students. Now, let's look at some of the data we collected. We analyzed the data we gathered overall and by stakeholder group. We looked at both the quantitative ratings of satisfaction as well as qualitative feedback. Overall, respondents from each CSE stakeholder group indicated high levels of satisfaction with the proposed 2026-2027 academic calendar. Approximately 80% of respondents were satisfied or very satisfied with the placement of the first and last days of school, the week-long breaks in September, November, February, and April, as well as the semester break. The majority of respondents were satisfied or very satisfied today as a digital learning day and the frequency of the early release days. There's a decrease in the frequency of early release days from our current school year beginning next school year, with it moving from being another month. In the comments, we still saw some misconceptions around that. There was less satisfaction with the placement of the early release days. Qualitative feedback shows a desire by some for early release days to occur on Fridays. While we hear this feedback, we must also balance it with the intent of the early release days, which is professional learning for teachers. We have heard similar feedback in the past, and in last year's extensive survey, Wednesdays were ranked as the second highest preferred day. For the best interest of teachers' professional learning, the release days have remained on Wednesdays. In addition to asking about overall impressions and general feedback on the calendar, we also sought specific feedback about the inclusion and placement of a teacher workday within the semester. If you remember, this came out of our Teacher Advisory Council. One proposal was to shift an existing teacher workday to October 12th, which is the Indigenous Peoples' Day federal holiday. Approximately 79% of survey respondents indicated support for this shift. This included 82% of our teacher respondents and 84% of our student respondents. Therefore, in the calendar being recommended for adoption tonight, you will see the October 12th day designated as a teacher workday rather than a day both staff and students are scheduled to be in school. With this October 12th change, an additional shift was needed to maintain the 180 student instructional days and 190 teacher days. Respondents were provided a number of possible scenarios, including the ability to provide their own solution. Overall, the highest ranked option was making Friday, December 18th, the last day of the semester for students, and also making it an early release day. This was preferred by nearly 40% of teachers. This is a change you will see from the draft calendar that previously had Thursday, December 17th being the last student day of the semester. In the qualitative feedback, families commented they preferred not having to find full-day childcare for the single Friday. Teachers indicated that working December 18th was preferable, especially to the option of shifting the January 4th teacher workday. January 4th was seen as a vital day for teachers to return refreshed and a day to plan to prepare to receive students at the beginning of the second semester. The preliminary survey data and calendar recommendations were shared with Dr. Whitaker's Teacher Advisory Council for any additional insights. I'm happy to report that these teachers appreciated understanding the complexities of calendar development and also supported the recommended shift I just described, made it elected. And so, the calendar being recommended tonight reflects two changes to the draft presented to the board last month and shared for stakeholder feedback. First, it adds that October 12th as a teacher workday. Second, it makes December 18th the last day of the semester for students and teachers. Note that that's also an early release. We are so grateful to the stakeholders who took time to provide their feedback in the calendar survey. We feel this calendar reflects our community values and prioritizes the needs of our students, staff, and families. If there are any questions before I read the recommendation, of course, I will be happy to entertain.
One, thank you so much for the teacher workday. And I think I'm just trying to figure out, like with the December 18th, it may have been, you know, the most number of the best of, you couldn't have a January 4th workday if you didn't, we have a certain number of days that have to be met, right, for employment, for teaching. And so therefore, when you see something like 36%, it's also because, well, then January 4th is that great day where the teachers can prep while the students are not there. So everyone comes back ready to go on.
In the survey design, while it was only the 39%, it was a lot of different rankings for it to be distributed upon. And so that was the highest, and then also reading through the qualitative feedback as well, it helped substantiate that that was significantly the highest rated one.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
I'm pleased that we have settled on one calendar prior to the winter break, and I'm certain families appreciate the knowledge for future planning. Additionally, I appreciate the feedback from my Teachers Advisory Council on the way the calendar would reduce teacher burnout through the addition of the workday, that teacher workday.
May I read the recommendation?
Yes, please.
I recommend the City Schools of Decatur Board of Education approve the 2026-2027 student academic calendar.
Do I have a motion to approve the 2026-2027 academic calendar?
So moved.
Board Member Johnson Davis approves the motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
Board Member Anderson, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mrs. Lynch, for working through all these processes with all stakeholders. Next, we have items for action, information, or discussion. Board, we will now move on to consent agenda items, which include monthly items such as financial, nutrition, and personnel reports, as well as overnight and out-of-state student travel. I will solicit comments from the board on each item. After the item has been discussed, it will be moved to consent. There will be a motion to accept the consent agenda at the end of discussion for all items. Dr. Whitaker, do we have a monthly financial report?
Yes, Vice Chair Sultan, Dr. Lonita Broom, Chief of Financial Officer, will present the monthly financial report.
Good evening. The October 2024 financial reports and definition of function codes are located in the assembly agenda. The Finance Department operates strategic accelerators with a specific focus on Accelerator for organizational effectiveness and excellence through financial equity and transparency. The general fund budget is $106,801,290. The budget has increased by $130,554 from last month due to the award of the preschool handicap study. As of October, the district collected 34%, or approximately $35 million of the budgeted revenue. Year to date, which is in line with the percentage that was collected this time last year. Approximately $4 million of the month of October, which is 2% less than the amount of revenue collected for September, due primarily to a small decrease in property tax collection from September to October. All other revenue is trending as anticipated. Expenditures are normal for this time of the year. The district has expended 29% of the overall budget, or approximately $28 million year to date. For the month of October, expenses equated to approximately $9 million. This is slightly higher than what was expended last year, due primarily to salary and benefit increases. The majority of October expenditures are for salaries and benefits, which make up 87% of the budget. For the month of October, there was a deficit of approximately $5 million, which means the district expenditures for the month were $5 million more than the monthly revenue. Last year at this time, the deficit was $4 million. The approximately $5 million has been deducted from the fund balance, which is normal for this time of the year. Overall, year-to-date, there's a surplus of approximately $8 million, due primarily to the large receipt of property tax collection posted in July. Last year, this time, there was a surplus of $11 million. The surplus of revenue is normal at this time of the year and accounts for the healthy fund balance of approximately $27 million, which includes the unaudited beginning fund balance of approximately $19 million. The fund balance last year at this time was also $27 million. Please note that the fund balance will continue to decrease as expenditures increase. October revenue for capital index funds consisted of $590,919 from earnings on investment and Slot 6 collections. Expenditures are normal for this time of the year, and the $655,475 deficit was deducted from the fund balance, which was approximately $6 million in October. Fiscal year 25 anticipated expenditures for capital is approximately $12.7 million. Special revenue funds are grant funds, including federal and state grants not budgeted in the general fund. We have closed out all of the fiscal year 24 grants, and as of October 31st, 2024, have been awarded approximately $2.8 million in grants. School nutrition revenue is coming in less than projected, and expenditures are trending within the same range as previous years. The school nutrition budget is being analyzed and will most likely need financial support from the general fund. The $135,125 surplus for October increased school nutrition fund balance to approximately $2 million. Last year, this time, school nutrition fund balance was $1.8 million. I will be happy to respond to any questions or provide clarification.
Thank you, Dr. Broom. Any questions or comments from the board? Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This item can be moved to consent. Consent agenda item number 2 is the school nutrition report. Are there any comments from the board?
No.
All right, this item can also be moved to consent. Consent agenda item number 3 is the personnel report. Are there any comments or questions from the board? This item can also be moved to consent. Consent agenda item number 4 is overnight and out-of-state travel. Are there any comments or questions from the board? No? This item can also be moved to consent. Consent agenda item number 5 is fiscal year 26 budget priorities and parameters, which were discussed in the work session last month. Are there any comments from the board?
Does this include the school allotment guidelines, or is that the next item? Okay, well.
Any other questions? All right. This item can also be moved to consent. Consent agenda item number 6 is fiscal year 26 school allotment guidelines, which were discussed at the board retreat last month. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Oh, go ahead.
So, Sophie, you asked earlier, I think, about what we learned and, what was difficult, and this would be one of them. So when I came today, I didn't think I had any questions about this. But after reading multiple questions from people, I do. So I guess my first question procedurally is, we are taking items and putting them on the consent agenda, especially since James isn't here. Is there an opportunity to take this school allotment guideline and move it until the next board meeting? That may interrupt Dr. Whitaker's plans, and that may not be something the rest of the board wants, but I think that would be my first request, because I feel like I need more time now to look at some of the questions that people are asking and understand a little bit more about what I'd be approving.
So procedurally, we'd have to make a motion to
Yeah.
move it off the consent and then vote to move it off consent.
And I think that it turns out to be what everyone else wants.
I also think, we've gotten a number of questions about a particular portion of the school allotment guidelines. So are there some specific questions that maybe we want to ask of Ms. Walker, who's here, or Dr. Whitaker? Maybe we should, rather than moving it, which we can make a motion and then move it. Is it worth it to ask some of the questions out loud?
Okay. So my first question, I know we've gotten a lot of communications, emails and questions about the AP positions. There are 5 AP positions and 3 equitable outcome positions. Would the APs have first dibs at those equitable outcome positions?
Yes. So as we begin to staff for next year, we would have a full a process that's called the reduction in force process, where those individuals who were impacted by reduction in force would be able to have first priority for interviewing for any of those positions.
And then the remaining 2.
Pick them up.
Okay.
It's an HR process. It's a standard HR process. It's similar to like a surplus process.
Mm-hmm.
When you have multiple, more teachers in a building than you do the need for it, and you need to move people around. So that is what would be the reduction in force process.
So they would interview first. then you make decisions. It's possible that one could be picked out of that, and then you go and start holding more interviews for those positions? Or is it possible that 3 APs could take those positions right off the bat after interviewing?
We look at the program need, we look at your certifications, qualifications, and we place you, the affected employees where they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And they will be, definitely have first dibs as far as vacancies within the district.
Maybe if I could ask the superintendent to, I know we talked about this in the retreat as to why we were looking at needing the equitable outcomes positions, but maybe if you could just take a second and talk about why this change is necessary and what we're going to accomplish with it.
Yes, so currently the City Schools of Decatur is under state oversight for our disproportionate identification of Black students specifically for special education. There are a couple of different violations that that are really processes that we're not doing with fidelity. One would be child find. And so these individuals will help oversee and have the key conversations that need to be had from an equity standpoint around students. And it's some support that is necessary. And because from an equity standpoint, you should not have the over-identification of special education students, specifically Black students. So when you talk about equitable outcomes, you really need some people who are versed in what's considered the Georgia MTSS process, which is that including of child find. It's the understanding that it is about the academics, it is about the behavior, it is about the attendance, it is about the curriculum, it is about the on track, off track, and the ways in which we are supporting students. And I have said consistently since the end of my 90 days that we need a lot of work in that area. And now to be with Georgia Department of Education oversight due to that, I think it is incumbent upon this board to make the decision to really do something about that.
And would it be correct to characterize this as, because I know a number of the comments that I've seen from the community and from some of the emails that we've received has been really around the MTSS process and how critical the APs are in supporting that process. And so what it feels a bit to me that we're broadly recognizing the MTSS process needs support, that we actually really do need focus on some of those tiered support structures and some instead of a position that is broad and general across the entire school, really ensuring that we double down and focus on that specific need that has brought us to a point where the state is engaging with us. This is actually a better way to address that specific requirement.
Yes, it is.
And to clarify, would this position be in the school? So would this be somebody who was like housed at Glenwood?
In the school.
So I think that some folks are thinking that this is a central office position, but,
No.
so can you clarify that this would be somebody that would be living in the school? Okay.
Yes, they are in schools. They are not central office positions.
But they are itinerant, right?
Yes.
They'll be,
Yes, because we're not bringing on 7.
Right.
We're only bringing on 3.
right, so they'll be moving between
Mm-hmm.
the different elementary schools and one upper elementary school.
Yes, and we're focusing there because the violations of child find or potential violations of child find or the monitoring of implementation of child find really is occurring in that K-2 space and 3-5 space, not as much in the 6-12.
I wanted to ask Tracy, what other information, did you want to consider?
You know, I hear about the need, and I mean, I guess I need to contextualize this, because I keep thinking ironically of the discussion we had earlier about new trustees, right? And what you learn and what you don't know. And so, I look at a lot of things through a teacher lens. I know how I feel philosophically. I know what my responsibility is as part of this governance team. And I look at the CCRPI, right? Phenomenal job that I know couldn't have happened without you, Dr. Whitaker, without your team, and without teachers. And right now, I just don't feel like I know enough to explain to people. I know the need, I hear that, right? I understand that we're gonna move this to here, but I just don't know if I have enough to really explain that I know how it's happening and why it's happening. And so I think, one, I just appreciate, public questions, because those help me. And so I think I need more time to look at this and think about it. I know we talked about it in November, but I also know at the board retreat, I talked specifically about, staff working face-to-face with students. And so I'm encouraged to hear that this new staff would be in the school building. But I think I still need to understand more. And I think the bigger thing we also have to do is make sure that the community understands what we're doing. I think sometimes we have questions because people don't understand. And so what I learned today is just a lot of people are confused. Whether it's false information that people are sharing, they didn't know that these staff wouldn't be at the Wilson Center, and that's really why I just have more questions than I thought I did. Does that answer it?
This is a really good time though for us to focus on that, right? So this is the opportunity right now to be clear with the community about this information, right? So these are going to be in-school positions, not central office positions.
That is correct.
The individuals are going to be prioritized and have first dibs, I guess is the word that we said, around these positions. This is definitively needed because we are actually under the auspices of the state due to gaps that we have in this particular process. It is not actually inhibiting our ability to respond to MTSS. That was a comment that I heard. In fact, this is enhancing our ability to address that. In fact, because we have been needing to ask assistant principals to support MTSS, this is what's driving us to a position where we need to beef this capability up within the schools. I think we've seen some concerns or comments about riffing a bunch of paraprofessionals or something like that, which is not what we're talking about. That is not this process. So right now, in my mind, this is the opportunity to make things clear to the public about what this is and what we're trying to accomplish with it.
Additionally, I think what I'm hearing, this also came up during the board retreat, is that we also have to address the fact that some of the K-2 schools are overstaffed. Is that also what I'm hearing? Is that some of why we looked here as opposed to looking elsewhere, to
Retreat, I illustrated that what we get from the state as far as funding and how much over we are with, our school administrators, and especially with AP. And so when we were looking at the student achievement gap, that was one of the areas that we could really benefit from, making sure that these positions are in direct proximity to our students and making the difference in closing that achievement gap.
And to clarify, so the state funds 8.94 assistant principals at a total salary of $468,000. The district currently funds 16 assistant principals at a total salary of approximately $1.7 million, and approximately of that, 1.2 is funded locally. So to make that plain, our schools in the K-2 do not earn an assistant principal because for some of them, their enrollment is under 200 children. And an assistant principal for a school that is that small is a very, very costly price to pay for a small school model. So that is where the board has to understand, to keep a small school, you still have overhead. And that overhead of a principal and assistant principal to the tune of what we are putting in our budget is very costly.
I think that, and so maybe this is a follow-up question to that, maybe more so for the superintendent, is some of the concern from, I think, staff and other community members is if we pull the APs from the K-2 schools, we talked about how MTSS and some of those things would be redistributed into that position, but some of their other day-to-day operations, how do we anticipate that those will be handled? Are we thinking that those will fall on the principal, or, and you may not have the answer now, that may have to be long-term projection, but I think that's also some of the concern is that, you know, ultimately when those positions are not there, is it going to be more, is it going to be unmanageable for the principals?
A traditional school has a grade level of 150 children, 200 children. Most K-5 schools have schools that are that large. Across the metro, there are multiple districts that are facing potential closures of schools because the board is combating the fact that you cannot stand up a building with that few children with all the overhead it takes to run the school. Now, I am not suggesting that that is what we need to do, but we do need to make a decision because we are locally funding $1.2 million. And if you think about that, for each and every K-2 school where the probably max enrollment is not even 250 children, where most schools themselves, a grade level is that.
Well, I mean, I think that an alternative way to address this that you are not suggesting would be to close one of the elementary schools and reconsolidate.
I'm not suggesting that.
You are not, but the public should be aware that there is a set of decisions that we have to make about allocation of resources and where critical needs are highest. And it sounds like our critical needs are highest around MTSS and equitable support for our students, which is a big part of what some of these APs are doing anyway. We're repositioning around that, and we're choosing to do that to continue to support, I believe, the community's wishes to maintain small local schools.
Yeah.
As opposed to closing a school, which would involve, you know, basically ripping all of the staff in that particular school and reconsolidating students.
Yeah.
How does this work procedurally? Because, I mean, I have a few other ideas, and, you know, I realize we have an agenda, and so how does this work procedurally then in terms of moving this item? So if I am not comfortable approving it tonight, what's the next step?
Let's make a motion.
So we can, I think we can make a motion to move this one item, I guess, to be the next month.
If she gets the second.
Yeah, but then we would,
Yeah, but you have to have, yeah, you have to have a
then
second.
you have to have a second, and then we would vote.
And so, your legal counsel is providing this.
If there is a second, take a vote. If there is no second, it fails for a second.
Okay. Am I hearing this correctly? And I'm sorry, I'm learning. This is the first time this has happened. So if I say, you know, I would like to move this, and someone else on the board says, I too would like to move this, and then we vote on it. If I am the only one that wants to do that, no one else does, then it simply moves to consent agenda and we move on. Okay. Is there a preference?
If you want to make the motion, you make it.
Okay. Well, I'd like to move the student allotment guidelines to the January meeting. That's my motion.
Before we take that, I do want to let you know the implications of moving that. That means the school principals will not have their January meetings for their school allotments. They won't get their allotments until February. So that means your impact for your budget approval will move not from first draft in February, but first draft in March. So it's a domino effect because your school allotment guideline is presented for approval in now so that work can be done in January to give it the allotments to the school so that you can have a budget in February, draft 1, draft 2, and so just want to make sure you all know that moves your entire hiring timeline down a month.
And so there is no other way to revisit the staff allotment guidelines after I've had time to consider all the questions without affecting those timelines.
That's the impact.
Or are there any other specific questions that you would like us to answer now?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm hearing is we're funding our elementary schools and these AT positions largely through local funds, right? You know, I understand QBE, but I think the question that I'm seeing in some of the communications has been a bigger question of how we're using local funds and QBE funds. And so, again, I just am not comfortable approving this for the sake that we need to move on that timeline, and at the same time, I don't like holding up principals and hiring. And I'm sorry for the quandary.
So would you like to proceed with your motion? If so, can you restate it?
Sure, I would like to revisit the staff allotment guidelines in January, and I'm gonna add something to the motion, even if it inconveniences, so that we can necessary timeline that we need and the hiring process timeline we need.
Okay, so Board Member Anderson has a motion to move consent agenda item number 6, which is the fiscal year 26 school allotment guidelines off of consent agenda and move it to January. Is there a second? All right, hearing none, I believe the motion fails, and this item will be moved to consent. Do I have that right, legal? Thank you. All right, moving on to consent agenda item number 7, intergovernmental agreement. Thank you. Intergovernmental agreement for Legacy Park has been reached. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Hearing none, this item can be moved to consent. Agenda item number 8, which is ground lease agreement for Legacy Park. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I just want to make it clear to the public that this was an executive session item. Do we need to be clear about that, just so folks know that this has been reviewed under the auspices of exec session?
Yes, yeah, it was already on the agenda first.
Okay.
It was in the published agenda in the beginning because, it was already published at the city, so we just published the city's exact document, so.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or discussion from the board on consent agenda item number 8? All right, hearing none, this item can be moved to consent.
Yes, Vice Chair Sultan, may I read the recommendation?
Yes, please.
Excuse me, I recommend the City Schools of Decatur Board of Education approve the consent agenda items 1 through 8.
Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes consent agenda items 1 through 8?
So moved.
Board Member Utz makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Johnson Davis makes a second. Are there any or questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to policy, Dr. Whitaker.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sultan. I would like to call on Mrs. Amanda Lynch, Chief of Staff, to present 4 policies for second read action.
Good evening again all. Tonight we have 3 policies for second read action. Each of these policies were presented last month for first read and have been available for public comment through Assembly. First, we have policy JCEB, student hearing procedures. We did receive 1 public comment through Assembly. The comment itself did not address or provide suggestions to the actual policy. It has been shared with the board and appropriate staff members. Therefore, no changes have been made to the version that was presented last month. May I read the recommendations?
Yes, please.
I recommend the City Schools of Decatur Board of Education approve policy JCEB, student hearing procedures for action.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the recommendation to approve policy JCEB, student hearing procedures for action?
So moved.
Board Member Johnson Davis makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Utz seconds the motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Second, we have policy JQK, exchange students. No feedback was received through public comment, and no changes have been made to the version presented last month. May I read the recommendation?
Yes, please.
I recommend the City Schools of Decatur Board of Education approve policy JQK, exchange students for action.
Do I have a motion to approve the recommendation to approve policy JQK, exchange students for action?
So moved.
Board Member Utz makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Anderson seconds the motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion approved, carries unanimously.
And third, we have policy JGSG, student accidents. No feedback was received through public comment, and no changes have been made to the version presented to the board last month. May I read the recommendation?
Yes, please.
I recommend the City Schools of Decatur Board of Education approve policy JGSG, student accidents for action.
Do I have a motion to approve the recommendation to approve policy JGFG, student accidents for action?
So moved.
Board Member Utz makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Anderson seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. All right, moving on to parliamentary procedure. Before we move to public comment, we'll have a brief discussion regarding our parliamentary procedure for public comment during board meetings. At our last board retreat, we learned the phrase, while this is a public meeting we are holding, it is a meeting of the board. While this is a public meeting, we are holding a meeting of the board in public. Therefore, we must consistently implement guidelines for audience members and those who seek to address the body as a whole regarding issues related to the City Schools of Decatur. As a board, we have outlined the following areas of improvement: time limits, sign-up procedures, maintaining order, rules of decorum, and personnel matters. Time limits. Time limits will be strictly enforced. Sign-up procedures. Sign-up procedures will be open until 1 hour before the start of the regular board meeting. Maintaining order. The chair must ensure order is maintained. The chair must enforce the board's established meeting rules to manage the public. Rules of decorum. All public comment is directed to the chair, not the audience. All participants must adhere to proper meeting etiquette. For example, refraining from cheers, applause, shouts from the floor. Personnel matters. Personnel matters shall not be discussed. The board will use a broad definition of personnel matters, so no individual employee shall be named, identified, nor discussed. I would like to open it up to the board for comments and discussion.
I want to make sure that we're clear when we say broad definition and when we say no employee shall be named, discussed, or anything of those lines. What we also mean is no no situation that exists that might be able to individually identify an employee. We're going to be fairly strict about ensuring that if you're even getting close to that line, we're going to be needing to close this down.
And I also want to clarify that community members are welcome to discuss their own experiences, but they cannot mention ongoing personnel issues. So last month, we had students that talked about their experiences here in the district. And if community members want to come and share those experiences and concerns with the board, we are still open to hearing those, that commentary. But they cannot discuss personnel.
If I may, Dr. Johnson Davis, I would say more than open, we welcome them coming to share those perspectives.
All right.
I also think, we realized that we had some work to do in this area. It was confusing for the public because public comment, looked and felt differently based on different meetings. Sometimes we didn't enforce these rules the way that we should have. They are in policy, and our goal is to make it look consistent, by making sure that the details are there.
all on the responsibility is ours to make sure that we are enforcing these rules consistently and making sure that the details are there.
That doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from the public, but I think to this current topic, when it comes to personnel issues, investigations, CSC employees, I think we want to be clear that it's not that we don't want to hear about it. Naming employees, not what public comments is for.
And we're gonna also be more intentional about being consistent with the time as, community members are, sharing their commentary. We've discussed different ways to do that to make sure that we are consistent, perhaps the sound also going off when the clock ends, and then possibly the mic going mute, to make sure that we are being fair to everyone.
I think it's important to note that we're doing sure we are fair to everyone. We recognize that we haven't been great about that. I think our default has been to try to be accommodating and to try to be nice and to allow people to finish what they're trying to say and to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The outcome of some of these decisions is gonna look and feel different in public comment. We're gonna be considerably stricter, we're gonna be considerably more concise, and we're gonna be considerably more consistent when folks are up here. I just wanna make the public aware that is gonna be a little bit of the changes that you can anticipate seeing during public comment.
Any other thoughts? All right, well, we have 5 minutes until public comment. Dr. Whitaker, do you have anyone signed up for? Dr. Whitaker, do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
No, Dr. Sultan, we do not.
Okay, well, we will move on to future dates. The next board meeting is scheduled for January 14th, 2025 at the Wilson Center. Additionally, on that day, there will be a virtual House Bill 581 opt-out resolution hearing at 10 a.m. and 6:45 p.m. The final virtual hearing will be held January 21st, 2025 at 6:45 p.m. There will be a community meeting at Glenwood Elementary School on January 22nd, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. where we want to engage with the community regarding the new Early Learning Childhood Center. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 6:31 p.m.